Ukraine and the NATO alliance have built a strong partnership. Ukraine is the only non-NATO nation supporting every NATO mission. In Afghanistan and Iraq, Ukrainian troops are helping to support young democracies. In Kosovo, Ukrainians are helping keep the peace. Ukraine now seeks to deepen its cooperation with the NATO alliance through a membership action plan. Your nation has made a bold decision, and the United States strongly supports your request. In Bucharest this week, I will continue to make America's position clear. We support MAP for Ukraine and Georgia. Helping Ukraine move toward NATO membership is in the interest of every member in the alliance, and will help advance security and freedom in this region and around the world.
Security, freedom, I don't think so. That sealed Ukraine's fate. That clip right there, George Bush coming out effectively saying, and not just George Bush, NATO itself. I could show you the documentation from NATO where they say we invite Georgia and Ukraine to join the NATO membership. And all of them understood what that meant. Meaning all of them understood that there was a red line for Russia. All of them understood that that was going to be a major provocation. And if you've noticed, president after the next, including, by the way, Donald Trump, they've attended to that. What do you think that mineral deal is? There are two parts of that mineral deal that are not even exposed to the Ukrainian Rada and has not been exposed to the American public. And yet, here we are. It's effectively a soft lend-lease agreement that allows Donald Trump to go to MAGA and say, hey, I'm getting the money back. So if I'm giving the money, it's not a big deal because in 30 years, depending upon what's left of Ukraine, we are going to get the money back. So don't worry about it all that much. For all of this talk about Donald Trump being the peace candidate, it doesn't seem like he's a peace candidate. He's given money, he's given weapons, he's putting on sanctions, he's given support, he's continuing the war. And even from the standpoint of people saying, well, Donald Trump is going to leave NATO or stepping back on NATO, not really. Donald Trump wants to focus on China while giving over NATO responsibility to Europe with this idea of pushing and cajoling Europe to effectively build up your militaries, cut your social services, put more money into military, increase spending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. MAGA has been radically betrayed and lied to. The scam that Donald Trump has been running is a quote, I want to end wars, not start wars. Okay, well, it doesn't seem like you're doing that all that much. If you look at what's taking place in Yemen, where he's murdering civilians in mass, and when I say murdering civilians, I mean murdering civilians, because the reporting is that they have not been able to stop Yemen, and considering that Ansar Allah was able to basically hit Ben Gurion Airport and shut down the airport, it doesn't seem like your bombing is necessarily doing what you are saying it is doing. And yet the bombing continues. If you look at Israel, Donald Trump has effectively said, hey, you have a free hand. The reporting says you have a free hand. So do whatever you want. So if you want to knock down buildings, fair enough. That's perfectly fine with me. My name is Donald Trump, despite the fact that I had a peace deal that was supposedly done by the quote unquote realist, and it was violated all the way through without Donald Trump saying anything about the fact that it was violated all the way through. For all of this talk, when Donald Trump comes and says, oh, I care about the civilians. There's so many people dying in Ukraine. Oh, it's so horrible. There's so many people dying. He doesn't seem to care that much about the Yemenis. He doesn't seem to care that much about the Palestinians who are literally being starved to death. He doesn't seem to care. And the war that he is provoking with Iran, with these dodgy, fake peace talks. And the reason I call him dodgy and fake, whether Donald Trump was maneuvered because he's that incompetent, or whether Donald Trump himself is going with a particular strategy, is irrelevant, right? If you're saying that the Houthis are one-to-one with Iran, and if indeed you're going with maximalist plans in regards to a war, you are creating a context by which you could try to justify attacks. Now, I would argue that the rest of the world is not necessarily going to agree with it, because in the same way that you're using this, we are trying to do peace. Well, Iran is doing it better. They stayed with the JCPOA for a year. And even now, the foreign minister of Iran is still going with this idea that, well, the talks have been postponed. They haven't been postponed. The United States haven't even signed up to the talks that were supposed to take place, meaning the fourth round of talks. And on top of that, you get a drunken Hegseth, and people may take issue with me calling him an alcoholic. I have no issue calling him an alcoholic at all. I think he's a lunatic. The notion that you get a TV personality to run the Pentagon is outrageous, but whatever. Your guy is out there screeching like a maniac that he is going to attack Iran. Okay. So if your guy at the Pentagon is saying that, if you are making a one-to-one with the Houthis saying any attack that takes place is effectively an attack coming from the Houthis, I'm going to pin that on the president of the United States, because the president is the one that sets the agenda. And the agenda seems to be at some point war, strikes at some point on Iran. Now, whether or not, I strongly suspect and put to you that Donald Trump is going to run into a buzzsaw when he tries to do that, because I think he is grotesquely underplaying Iran's capability and overinflating the U.S. capability, considering they couldn't even pacify the Houthis. But neocons don't care about reality. Delusion is a beautiful place. As I point out, the sun is shining, wind is blowing, the sea is a crystal blue in the land of delusion. And again, if Donald Trump is that incompetent, or the people around him are maneuvering him, or again, if indeed he's taken that position on his own, and he believes that he can set a context to justify strikes and believe that Iran won't retaliate, he's out of his mind. Chaos is going to be what results. The point I'm making here is the peace candidate that ran on this notion of, I want to end wars, not start wars, seemed to be failing miserably at that task all across the board. And even in this context of, well, we want to make peace with Russia and Ukraine, the deal that Trump came up with was so comically ridiculous that on this show, I couldn't figure out whether he was that stupid or whether it was intentionally designed to fail. I would tell you that Russia doesn't really care what Europe thinks at this point. Russia doesn't even really care what Donald Trump thinks. They made him an open to see where he was on this issue. Trust? No. The notion that Trump is trying to be a mediator while simultaneously waging war on Russia is outrageous. How many Russians have they killed in this fool's errand? What, 100,000? Maybe 200,000? I don't know what that number is. Let's say that number is 150,000. The U.S. was directing those strikes and attacks. The U.S. was providing intelligence and weapons. Donald Trump can't absolve himself as if Joe Biden was something unique and different when he himself picks up the exact same mantle that Joe Biden effectively left off, or for that matter, whether he's trying to organize Europe into a NATO as he focuses on other priorities. The point that I'm making here is MAGA has been grotesquely taken on a ride. You have been betrayed. You've been lied to, scammed. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. And whether you see it or not is secondary to the point. When Steve Bannon said Trump should walk the F away, why do you think he was saying that? Well, because Steve Bannon wasn't looking at it through the lens of U.S. foreign policy and the continuity of U.S. foreign policy. Bannon was looking at it through the lens of, why are we doing this? Just like Tucker Carlson and just like many other people who are considered themselves part of MAGA. Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, whatever you think of her, she seems to be consistent on this idea that this is a fool's errand. You will not get another penny from me for that fool's errand. But again, that is under the assumption that Donald Trump is doing and believing what he says. And I've come to the assessment that that's not the case at all. I don't believe that the peace candidate is indeed a peace candidate. If anything, I believe that he has taken this country, and for the most part, his supporters, for a ride under this idea of peace purely for political expedience to get elected. And everything that he's done up to this point bears that out. If you are offering Russia a deal, quote unquote, and you have effectively lost the war, Okay, losers don't get to dictate terms. So the notion that you're going to try to dictate terms to somebody who kicked your ass on the battlefield is pretty outrageous. And the notion that you believe that Russia is going to believe you is even more farcical. If you really think that they were going to shake your hand and say, hey, we get to hang out with Donald Trump, this is fantastic, you are dumber than I think you are. And my point is, from the standpoint of MAGA, they have been utterly and completely betrayed. Utterly and completely betrayed, even more so than the American public. MAGA specifically, who, all things being equal, believe Trump is going to end the war in 24 hours. Donald Trump is going to make peace. He's going to go to North Korea. He's going to talk to Iran. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. He's going to do this. All of those things were wrong. All of those things were false. And everything that he's done up to this point is indicated that all of those things were effectively just lies. Effectively just lies. My guest is here, and I want to get to my guest because I don't want him waiting for a long time during my monologue. We are joined with a crowd favorite, actually, Brian Berletic. Let me bring him on. Host of the new Atlas, a fantastic show. I watched that show before I even knew who Brian Berletic was, for God's sake. Brian Berletic is a Bangkok-based geopolitical researcher, writer, and host of the new Atlas. Brian, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me back. And I think that was an excellent monologue. I'm not even sure what else I could add to it.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for that. I mean, look, I know that there are some people who go with this idea that, well, Donald Trump is a peace candidate. And, well, he tried to make peace in Ukraine. Well, he tried to make peace with the Iranians. He did make a peace deal with the Palestinians. But I think what they're missing is that there are two sides to negotiations. And if you craft the deal that you know is going to fail, then that's not you being a peace anything. That is you effectively gaming the system to get this take as if you are something that you're effectively not. I want to get your take on some of the events that are taking place around the world right now. And let's start off in Ukraine. You posted a tweet that I thought was fantastic. And you pointed out that this kind of diversity of concerns that, okay, well, the US doesn't want to be overly occupied in Ukraine. And so their thought is, well, we need to continue what George Bush was talking about right there with that NATO clip in 2008, the Bucharest summit. But we need Europe to take more of the burden so we can focus on issues of China. Dig into that for me. If you had to explain this to somebody and you had to kind of make this point clear to a MAGA supporter that, hey, Trump is not the guy who you say he is, go into that for me. Give that explanation to the true believers out there. I'll call them that.
I think a lot of Trump supporters would accept that the United States is a modern day empire. It's engaged in political interference and military conflict all around the globe. Its military is stretched all around the globe. And I think a lot of Trump supporters who have good intentions and they want to see the US turn inward and build itself up rather than continuously interfere abroad, I think they would accept that premise. The problem is, just as you say, they backed President Trump because he said he was going to end all of these conflicts. And the dangerous thing is now they've invested so much in President Trump that even when he does a complete 180, that they're still going to support him and they'll start trying to rationalize these things that he's doing. That, just as you say, it's a blatant violation and betrayal of his campaign promises. Now, what the United States is doing is what every empire in terminal decline does. It starts outsourcing empire to all of the vassals that it has captured and drawn in and expanded its empire with. We remember the Roman Empire using what they called auxiliaries. These were foreign troops, entire armies of foreign troops that the Romans were using as an extension of their own military power because they themselves were in decline. They didn't have enough Roman troops who were like originally Roman citizens to go around. And so they began depending on these auxiliaries, and it worked for a while. It didn't stop terminal decline. It kind of put it off until a later date. But that is what we're watching. Once again, we're watching the United States using Europe, trying to use Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, every nation that it has political influence over or has already completely politically captured. They're transforming them into a battering ram they can use to continue all of these conflicts. So having someone else take over the conflict for you and continue it, or at least try to freeze it until a later date, that's not ended. That's just like you said, that wasn't, and that's not a peace candidate or a peace president. It's a scam artist who told you one thing and did another. All of these conflicts clearly, obviously, are all going to continue, just through other means. And not even really, because the US is still going to be sending weapons and money to Ukraine. They're just going to be doing it through Europe.
I don't even know if it's through entirely Europe. That mineral deal, it is effectively a Lend-Lease agreement.
Yes.
Like, initially, I was like, this deal doesn't make sense. Like how we are sending them weapons with the idea that the weapons equal some kind of money. And in 20 to 30 years, Ukraine is supposed to pay us back with the proceeds that it gets from whatever they get. Now, as I pointed out, we don't even know what those other documents are. The RADA doesn't even know what those other documents are because there are multiple documents associated with it. But what we do know is that they've come up with some kind of arrangement where Trump can send weapons, money, etc. He is apparently crafting sanctions, which is effectively exactly what Joe Biden was doing and what MAGA said that they didn't want because Joe Biden was doing it. So it seems that there's going to be direct infusions of money and cash. Do you think this is in any way going to inhibit this kind of decline that seems obvious at this point to anybody who's paying attention to it?
No, because it's just a continuation of exactly what the Biden administration was doing, which is what I warned people about even before when he was a candidate. Trump won the election. I warned that this was going to happen. This is what he did the first 4 years he was in office. This is what President Obama did. Everyone pinned their hopes on him to end all of these wars. And that's what he said he was going to do. And then for 8 years straight, he did the exact opposite. He not only continued all of the wars handed over to him, he started new wars that President Bush Jr. ran out of time to provoke and carry forth. And so that this is exactly what the Trump administration is doing, except it's been split by the Biden administration. 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Biden, now the other 4 years of Trump. And if you weren't really paying attention to who was in the White House, would you even notice any difference in terms of actual policy? This whole thing with the Ukraine mineral deal, you could see the narrative that they were using to draw Americans along. If they could just get half or a good percentage of the population to go along with this, they can politically kick the can down the road. That's what this is all about. It's about making it look transactional when in reality, it is just a complete continuation of what the Biden administration was doing, because it isn't Biden's policy. It's not Trump's policy. It is the unelected corporate financier interests that fund these think tanks, that devise these policies and send them to Washington with lobbyists, get people on both sides to sign off on it. And so you look at the mineral deal and the Trump administration is talking about, well, Ukraine's going to pay us money for these weapons. We're not just giving them these weapons. With what money? Their economy is destroyed. And their economy is never, ever going to come back as long as this conflict continues. They will never have an economy capable of paying for these weapons. They're going to send these weapons to Europe. Maybe they can shift it a little bit onto European taxpayers, but it's still going to be American money one way or another paying for these weapons. And then just think about how morally bankrupt the whole premise of the mineral deal is in the first place. This is your proxy war. You are fighting Russia, using Ukraine as an intermediary, and then you're telling the victim that you threw into this proxy war. You overthrew the government. You handpicked and installed a client regime. You threw them into this proxy war. You have destroyed the country. And now you're demanding all of the money back on your own proxy war you're waging against Russia from the country that you politically captured. It is completely insane. I don't know what other way to describe it. And for Trump supporters, who, again, they had good intentions to begin with, but for them to just even hear this premise, just at face value, and not stop and think, what is this? What are we doing? We started this with Russia in Ukraine. How is it now Ukraine's problem to pay us back for our own failed proxy war? It doesn't make any sense at all. And if it was President Biden doing it, we would never hear the end of it. But now it's their guy, just like the Obama supporters. Now that it's their guy in office, suddenly it's okay. This is the problem.
Oh, so true. Oh, so true. Why do you think that thread runs through, and this sounds weird, it seems like there's a thread that regardless of the president, it runs through, meaning regardless of what a candidate's intentions are, and who the hell knows what their intentions are, right? Let's get into their mind. But it seems like there's a consistent thread of foreign policy that regardless of the president, that's the direction it goes. So yeah, we're going to pressure Iran. Yeah, we're going to pressure Russia. Yeah, we're going to pressure, like, it's this consistent campaign. I mean, is that the issue of empire? The moment that once they get into office, well, I am now the president of this empire and I need to preserve this empire. And if I do something different, the media is going to attack me. I have people around me that tells me, hey, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Like, what do you think it is that pushes this wind or that boat forward?
Well, you have to follow the money. Who ultimately is driving U.S. foreign and domestic policy? Who has all the money, all of the influence, control over the people who have all of the guns? Who is it? Is it actually the president? When you really think about it, who is President Trump, and what can he do as a person and with his administration around him? Just because there's a piece of paper that says he's in charge, what actual physical force, what actual power enables him to enforce the policies that, let's just pretend he had agency and policies that he wanted? Nothing. He actually has no ability to do that. It is the corporations, deeply entrenched corporate financier monopolies that have tremendous power spanning decades, if not generations. And they're the ones that own the media. They own the politicians. They have these think tanks that are producing this policy. And people say, Brian, how did you know this? You were right. Oh, I doubted you. I thought President Trump was going to be different and he was going to change everything. But you were right. How did you know that? I didn't guess. I don't have special psychic powers. It's in the policy papers. And just to explain it for ordinary people to understand, just think about a project in your own personal life. You're going to build a house or even something tiny. I built a chicken coop, for example. You have to draw up plans to know how much wood you need to buy, how much you're going to cut off and assemble it. You don't just buy a bunch of nails, a hammer, and some wood, and you put together a house, or even something small like a shed or a chicken coop. You need to have blueprints. We're talking about a global spanning empire. You cannot just do that off the cuff, day to day, like people imagine President Trump and his administration are doing. No, you need policy papers. Those are the blueprints of empire. This is why I always tell people to go look at the policy papers. I know they're long, they're dry, it's academic English, it's very difficult to get through. You have to have a foundation of knowledge just to understand what they're talking about. But if you could get past that and read them, you will see that years ago, they were writing all of this out in detail, almost verbatim. And now each administration, they just go down the list and they're just checking off these measures that are to be implemented. I've talked about the RAND corporations extending Russia paper. That was from 2019. If you go through just the table of contents, you could see that this has been US policy for years and years since it was put out. 2009, the Brookings Institution switched path to Persia paper. This is the US playbook for Iran. Literally everything in the table of contents has either been done or is in the middle of being implemented. And for the Trump administration specifically, there is Project 2025. And that was actually published in 2023. And absolutely everything the Trump administration is doing right now is spelled out in detail in that policy paper. It's a combination of papers written by different authors. And even though Trump supporters will say, well, Project 2025 of this corporate financier-funded think tank, the Heritage Foundation, has nothing to do with the Trump administration. Those are neocons. This is the Trump administration. He's fighting the deep state, not serving it. But he has literally taken people who have written chapters for Project 2025 and incorporated them into his administration. Peter Navarro, for example, regarding trade and the tariffs. He wrote a whole chapter about drowning the world in tariffs to maintain American dominance, not to reindustrialize the U.S., to maintain American dominance. It was the first sentence in the chapter that he penned. So people have to stop responding to political rhetoric, which is designed solely for perception management, and they have to follow the money and the connections back to the policy papers and see where these ideas are actually coming from. When you read the policy paper, you can clearly see how it filters through the political rhetoric, how they're trying to sell it to the public, how they're trying to divide the public against each other to at least prop up one part or another of the policy, regardless of which side you pick. But once you do that, you cannot unsee it. And then you will never fall for partisan politics ever again. You will see straight through it. You understand that it is these corporations that are driving this policy. And if you think this policy is a problem, then it's ultimately the corporations creating this problem.
And to be clear, there's a rationale for it. It's not willy-nilly. I mean, see, in my mind, there's always two strands. There's the geopolitical that a political figure may take. And there's this kind of economic strand. Russia is a very rich country. And if they could get their hands on the resources of that country, oh my God, they would want to do it. And so from a corporate sense, it makes all the sense in the world. And then you have people with these kind of geopolitical aspirations, let's say like a Joe Biden or, I don't know, big rando politician. It dovetails, but at the very least it seems to. I mean, give me your take on that. Or do you think, no, it's not an issue of dovetailing. It's just the politician has people around him. And even if the politician doesn't know or is not entirely aware, look, I think Donald Trump is completely incompetent. I don't believe for a moment that he had the ability to sit down and read one of those papers. By the same token, as you point out, Peter Navarro is around him. Some of these other neocons are around him. And I would wager to you, they have. So whoever is in his ear, even if it's not necessarily Trump as an individual, they're still following playbook, if that makes sense. Or do you agree with that?
Well, obviously, President Trump doesn't know what he's doing. He thinks Spain is the S in BRICS. How does somebody like that actually understand what's going on and is the sole person driving U.S. foreign and domestic policy? Just simply isn't reality. That's not reality. President Biden, I mean, again, Trump supporters admit that President Biden was in charge of nothing. So if he was in charge of nothing, who was? Yeah. And why can't you take that and then see it in the same way with your candidate, President Trump, who's obviously not making these decisions? When the man talks, he clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. If you've read these policy papers, you can see just how badly it's filtering through him and his poor understanding of these policies. This is what people are telling him to do. It filters through him as he tries to explain it with his abilities to explain it. And he's unable to do it clearly. And people think he's playing 5D chess. No, he just doesn't know what he's being told to do. He's just going along with it, just like he did the last 4 years, just like every U.S. president in recent memory has done, regardless of whether it's Republican or Democrat. The main purpose of U.S. foreign and domestic policy is to maintain domination. These are corporate monopolies. They don't want to compete. They don't want any competition. They don't want other companies around the globe to compete with them. They don't want any single nation state to have peer or near peer status. And this is open U.S. policy since the end of the Cold War. The New York Times wrote a whole article about this back in the 90s, about how there's a policy paper in the Pentagon about making sure there's no U.S. rival. That is how the U.S. was going to proceed from the Cold War. No rivals, not Russia, not China, not Iran. All of these regions of the world, no matter how far from the U.S. they actually are on the map, the U.S. must maintain control over all of them. And that's what we have seen. And again, regardless of who is president, there's not even one single, even small exception to this rule.
Full spectrum dominance. That was the goal, right? It's like we need to control air, sea, space, all of those things. And after the Soviet Union fell, we would never have another rival against us. I guess my saving grace in all of this is it's one thing to put it on paper. It's another thing. Reality is different. Like reality doesn't care about your ideology. And as you point out, Trump explains the stuff poorly. He implements it poorly. I mean, so like when he's talking about tariffs, he can't even make the case, hey, we need to get businesses and manufacturing back into America. And yeah, this hurts now, but in a few years, et cetera. I mean, he can't even say that. What he says is, well, your kid can do without $30. I said, who the hell is buying $30? Right? It's like, that's not the standard that most people go with. Most people go with groceries. Most people go with buying a house, a car, etc. Not 30 teddy bears, or for that matter, 1,000 pencils. It's filtered through him in these kind of comically ridiculous ways. I 1,000% agree with you on this. It seems like they overestimate themselves, though. Or do you agree with that one? Like, it seems that the policy paper overestimates U.S. power. And maybe that's because of decline. Like when George Bush was offering NATO membership in 2008, okay, well, the U.S. was on top of the world, right? It's another thing to do it now in 2025. Like, is that how you see it? Where there's a drift, and when you write that paper, it's one thing, but as you drift, it may not be the same reality that you're trying to implement going back to, 1990 or 2000 or whatever, 2001, when you might have been at the height of your powers.
Absolutely. I mean, there's this common saying, it looked good on paper, but then how does it actually translate in reality? And people who pursue global empire, the United States making up 4.5% of the entire global population, presuming dominion over the rest of the entire planet. What kind of mentality must you be infected with to just even entertain that possibility? Why, if you're a normal, rational, logical person rooted in reality, why wouldn't you say to yourself, we should have a proportionate role among all other nations rather than attempting to impose ourselves on all other nations? And this is, in fact, the approach nations like Russia, China, the multipolar world. Multipolar means we're not going to have one nation dominating all other nations. We're going to have nations working together. No one is going to presume dominion over anyone else. And there's going to be a balance of power. We will all play proportional roles in a new world order, not this unipolar world order that the U.S. has presumed over for decades now, since the end of the Cold War, even before that. And so just the mentality that they're approaching this with in the first place is completely detached from reality. It is a supremacist mindset. And you read these policy papers, they honestly believe that they are just inherently superior to the Russians. Obviously, they, all the jokes that they always tell about Russia. Mm-hmm. And of course, China, they say, it doesn't matter how many people there are in China. It doesn't matter how big their industrial base is. They did it by lying and cheating and stealing. And if we just get our acts together, we could outcompete China. In reality, it's just not possible. And because none of those excuses are true. They're not real. And if and there is a racist component to this, obviously. Oh, yes. The United States has been tremendously racist all throughout its history, obviously. I mean, I have people arguing with me about this. It's obvious, it's self-evident. And even to this day, they still believe. How could you be the United States and say, it doesn't matter how big China is, we can outcompete them? Unless you honestly believe Americans, especially white Americans, are inherently superior to the Chinese. One American is worth however many, 4, 5, maybe even 10 Chinese people, because of this supremacist mindset. And this is something that the collective West has clung to for centuries. This has always been the mindset. The British Empire, the French Empire, all of these European empires have always clung to this mentality that they are just superior. They never looked at their power as circumstances of history. The Industrial Revolution started in the West. This gave them an advantage over everyone else who up to that point had no reason to rapidly advance technologically. But now nations have caught up. And it's not as if, like we can see with our own eyes, people in China are just as capable of using this technology and even independently advancing it, even in ways that the collective West is incapable of now at this point. Has nothing to do with race, but inside their mind, they still think that it does, and they still have this inherent advantage. And this is what is driving American foreign and domestic policy as still at this point.
What do you think happens next in Ukraine? Do you believe a peace deal, no peace deal? The war continues until Russia effectively takes all of Ukraine or force an unconditional surrender. Like, and for that matter, just to piggyback on it, where does Europe go with this? I mean, does Europe really fall in line and say, all right, we are going to be fed to the Russians. We can't even raise 25,000 people right now, but at some point we will feed our own citizens to the Russians. How far do you think this goes?
Well, unfortunately, Europe has been politically captured by U.S. special interests. So Europe will just do whatever the U.S. tells them to do. And I pointed out all the way back in February of this year, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth told Europe, you're going to double down on Ukraine. You're going to expand your military industrial base. Doesn't matter your social programs, your infrastructure, forget about that. You're expanding your military industrial base so you can make weapons and so that you can send Ukraine weapons. You're going to spend not 2% of your GDP on NATO, but up to 5%, so more than double. You're going to spend on NATO, which is the core of the problem with Russia. Russia has been encircled, and they have attempted to contain Russia using NATO. It has spread up to and all along their border with every intention of absorbing Russia next. From Russia's point of view, this is existential, and they have said this on many occasions. That is the core issue here, NATO. And President Trump said he wants to bring peace. He wants to end this conflict. But when it comes to the core issue, NATO, he's not talking about freezing it, reducing it, withdrawing it from along Russia's border. He's talking about more than doubling the amount of money NATO is going to take from each one of these member states. So this was never designed to result in peace. It was always meant to freeze the conflict. It was, and I remember Secretary Hegseth literally said during this directive he was laying out to Europe, telling Europe, you're going to double down on Ukraine. We're not stopping this. There's no peace. You're going to get your troops and you're going to go into Ukraine as peacekeepers, again, to freeze the conflict like they froze the proxy war in Syria. He said this must not be a Minsk 3.0, but he was literally describing Minsk 3.0 with a little Syria-style buffer zone as a twist, as an added-on twist. And so that's what the U.S. was pursuing this entire time with peace talks, negotiations, always as a smokescreen. They did all of this behind, and it wasn't a very convincing smokescreen, not for me, not for people who were reading the policy papers and saw what was being set up. And there was this fake infighting between the US and Europe, and people were actually trying to say, look at Europe undermining President Trump in his peace talks by preparing this coalition of the willing to go into Ukraine. This is literally what Secretary Hegseth told them to do back in February. They were just doing what they were told to do. And I remember the British Minister of Defense even said face-to-face with Hegseth, you told us to ramp up our military spending and to do more on Ukraine, and we're doing it, and we'll do more. I mean, something like that. It's all on the Department of Defense's official website, even, and in videos you can watch. It's not like this is happening secretly, but they just hope that the rhetoric and the propaganda is more appealing and convincing, and truth is really ugly, and people will avoid that and cling to the propaganda. And for the most part, that is what people have done. A lot of people are shocked and dismayed now that President Trump has betrayed his campaign promises, or they're clinging to hope that he has some kind of a 5D plan where somehow this is still going to result in peace. But in reality, no, you were betrayed. And if you separated your emotions from your analysis, you would have saw this. This is just human nature. It's very difficult to do that. And they know that, and they take advantage of it.
I would tell you, I haven't read the policy papers. I worked at Russian radio station, and I knew just from analysis, like just from watching, it was like, okay, I give him the benefit of the doubt, see what he does. And I remember when he came out with his first plan, I was like, okay, this is absurd. Like the notion that you honestly, but for one, believing that they are so comically incompetent that they are not paying attention to the fact that those policy papers exist in the first place, that they don't hear Hegseth going to Europe saying, we need you to increase NATO budget, that they would accept an agreement where Europe is going to put peacekeepers, and you're like, this stuff was farcical. Like if you were trying to make this more comic and ridiculous, you couldn't. I defy you to do it, right? I don't know how you would even do it. I mean, they even had stuff like the U.S. was going to take over Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. It's like, are you serious? Like, it was so outlandish. You would think that you would try to make a paper or make a deal that was close to the edge, right? That it was close enough where you can justify saying, hey, we tried to make peace. The documents that they came out with was ludicrous. I agree with you. The public is going to be like, well, Donald Trump tried to make peace. They're going to say it. And they're going to say, well, the Russians are just, not into peace. Putin just doesn't want it. And they're going to ignore the Minsk agreements. They're going to ignore the Istanbul agreements. They're going to ignore just before the war where Putin was like begging Europe to come to the table on his own, basically on a deal where they can negotiate a new security architecture of Europe. The US media is not going to cover any of that, nor have they probably covered any of that. So the public is not going to know. And I think you're right. They're going to say, well, Trump tried to make peace, which is sad on so many levels. Like, it's so outlandish. It just really is. Yeah, that's unfortunate because Shoigu made the point of saying that Europe is effectively preparing for war. And even the buildup on the Finnish border is Russia acknowledging they seem to be preparing for war. And we need to effectively go with this kind of old Soviet-style defense plan of creating this kind of fortress country because they've surrounded our borders at this point. But do you think they're really even they're up to that? I mean, like, Europe is a basket case. And truth be told, for all the talk about the US saying we want 5%, the US has deindustrialized Europe. I mean, they've eaten them alive in regards to the money that they're sending for weapons. Okay, well, that money is going to the US. The 5 times amount for LNG. Okay, that money is going to the US. Like, you have these huge expenditures of money that are fleeing Europe into America. Companies being deindustrialized, especially Germany. Again, closing shop, or for that matter, going to the US. How could they even support an industrial base when their countries have effectively been gutted by following US policy religiously? It's just astonishing to me. Do you really think they're going to be able to build up their militaries in 5 years or whatever they're planning on doing this?
No, but look, Ukraine never had any chance either. This was always the way it was going to work out for Ukraine. It was going to be completely destroyed. This is the point of, I mean, even in the Rand Corporation paper from 2019, they said, is under a chapter titled Provide Lethal Aid to Ukraine. And they said, these are all the benefits. You're going to overextend Russia. You're going to draw them in and get them tied up in an Afghanistan style conflict, just like during the 1980s, which, the implications are you could possibly precipitate a Soviet Union style collapse from all of that. But then the risks were Ukraine will be completely destroyed. They will lose their territory. They will have disproportionate casualties, and they might even be forced into a disadvantageous peace, which is literally what is happening right now. Every single thing they warned about happened, but they already knew that. They already knew that back in 2019. They knew that, and they did it anyway. And they know that Europe is going to suffer the same fate. They don't care. That's the whole point of having proxies, is you're feeding them into the wood chipper so you don't go through the wood chipper. You're sending them through. And when you're done with the Ukrainians, you need to find someone else. So they'll put the Baltic nations in, Poland, and then France, Germany. They don't care. And from their point of view, and I think we've talked about this before, they see the possibility of having some sort of not quite World War III, but a devastating conflict spanning Eurasia between Europe and Russia, and then China and all of America's proxies in the Asia-Pacific region, maybe a little crossover. And the US is going to be all the way over there with the Atlantic on one side, the Pacific on the other side, and they'll emerge out the other side, best positioned to reassert domination over the planet, which is exactly what they did after World War II. And I think we also talked about this. They're just crossing their fingers and hoping, Russia and China don't decide to, scour the surface of America with nuclear weapons, or something doesn't spiral out of control, Or who knows, maybe Russia and China weather it. They build up their military and industry even larger and more urgently, and come out the other side of this an even bigger threat to American hegemony on the other side. Who knows? But this is what's going on inside their head. Doesn't mean that it's rational. Nothing about this has been rational up until this point. Why would anything going forward from here be rational?
But if I was a sociopath, maybe it is rational. And what I mean by, I know this sounds horrible, but what I mean by that is if your objective is world domination and you make up 4% of the globe, how, as you point out, how do you at 4% of the globe control the rest of 7 billion human beings? And can you really do it if China, Russia, Iran, India, Brazil, like meaning all of these countries grow, develop, build up industry, build up technology, competing on the world market, competing on the world stage? We come away with an assessment that we are fantastic because after the Second World War, there was nobody else. Like meaning like everybody else for the most part had been destroyed. And so it's like, hey, our industries are doing fantastic. With the dollar is doing fantastic. Yeah, because there's nobody else. And we've somehow internalized that as we're exceptional.
Yes.
Okay, well, you can't really be exceptional in a global marketplace. You can't even be exceptional against China. You can't even be exceptional against Russia. So what is it rational to come away with an assessment? All right, all of these people need to die. Full stop. And we are in a fight for survival of being the apex country. And the only way we can really do that, if we get into a nuclear exchange, okay, well, that's problematic. You lose if you die. But if we can push everybody else into one, okay, then we have a chance. Meaning they may not be looking at this as this is flat fat, what's going to take place. It's if we do nothing, we lose it all. I mean, it's immoral, it's unethical, agreed. It's, but see, I always make this argument that this stuff is about power. It's not about human life. It's not about right and wrong. It's not about ethics or morality. It's just about how do you gain control and how do you gain power? And from that point of view, is it rational, I guess? I know that sounds horrible. That sounds pretty disgusting when I think about it.
No, but that is exactly how they think. Now, I would argue that even from that point of view, it's still not rational. Look, let's just take a company as an example, a company pursuing profit over everything else. It just does whatever it can do each year, each quarter to increase its profit. At some point, you're going to overextend yourself and it'll become unsustainable, it'll unravel, and your company will collapse. If instead you focused on sustainable wealth, doesn't mean you have to give up profits, but you just don't pursue maximum profits. You just make profits when possible, while otherwise sustaining your company. Your company has a purpose. If you manufacture cars, your purpose is to make the best car for consumers while also making money and paying all of your workers and contributing to society. Now, in China, they have common prosperity built into their legal system, where every company has to actually contribute first and foremost to national development, the collective benefit of everyone, and then profit comes second. And we can see Chinese companies are making more than enough profit. They're doing very well. In many cases, they're outperforming American companies while still giving back to their country, to the people that have helped them grow. In America's the opposite. They're like a swarm of locusts, and they're just stripping everything bare. And when they run out of things to strip bare, they move to the next place to start the whole process all over again until there's nothing left to strip and the population of the locusts collapse or the companies begin to collapse. It's more of a pyramid scheme than a sustainable economy and civilization. So this is what's going on. And then to your other point, what has empire done all throughout history? It is always about dividing and conquering. You cannot, if the British Empire went into the Indian subcontinent and said, we're just going to try to conquer all of these people as is. No, they had to find the fault lines, exploit them, pit these people against each other, create now generations of animosity between these different groups of people, religious, ethnic, political groups, to the point where those people can't even see reality. They're just so obsessed with these divisions that were imposed upon them or exaggerated by the British Empire. The British aren't even there anymore. And those divides are still there. Look, India and Pakistan
and India,
are right on the verge of conflict. And who does that benefit? It doesn't benefit India or Pakistan. Who does it benefit? The United States. Its hegemony over the planet. This is exactly what the British did to them. And now the United States is doing it to them again. There's obviously forces in India and Pakistan that see through this or working against it, but there's so many more that aren't, that are falling right into it, carrying water for U.S. hegemony at the expense of their own existence, just like in Ukraine. The government of Ukraine, the military and the intelligence apparatus of Ukraine did the exact same thing. They're not working for the self-preservation of Ukraine. They're dismantling it almost brick by brick. And so that is the game plan. It is to divide and destroy, and hope that the U.S. is the last one standing out on the other side of this.
Yeah. Let's go to Iran for a bit. What do you think is going to happen in Iran? Do you think there are going to be strikes? I got to be honest. I'm divided on Trump's original intentions on Iran, despite the policy papers. Because again, I don't believe for a moment that Donald Trump has opened a book in the last 20 years, not even his own. Or looked into a policy paper at all. I don't think he has the ability to sit there and do it, frankly, to be bluntly honest with you. And so if I accept the premise that he may have looked at Iran and says, okay, I don't want to hold that bag. That's a big bag to hold if we attack it. So I'm going to send Witkoff and I'm going to try to get a deal. And then the people around him say, hey, you probably can get more out of that deal. Or, hey, you said that they weren't going to be nuclear reactors at all. Now, the people around him know full well that that's a red line. They know it before they say it. And you get people like Rubio or people like, Michael Anton, who are talking to him, maybe even Walz, maybe even Kellogg, saying, look, you don't want to look weak. And you can get more out of this deal if you just push a little bit more, missing the fact that there is nothing else out the deal that you can get. Meaning, to your point, I don't know what was in his mind. And regardless of what was in his mind, I can only look at the results. And the results end up being the same thing, regardless of what was in his mind. He still pushed to a point and boxed himself into this notion of, if you don't do X, I'm going to attack you. Okay, so now you've been maneuvered into, and I'm saying maneuvered. Who the hell knows, right? This could have been Donald Trump's original premise. But either way, you've been maneuvered into this position where that's a hell of a cliff to walk back off. You have to do it. Meaning his ego is not going to allow him to back away from that cliff. At least I don't believe it will. And so you've already told the public for the last 3 months that you're going to attack Iran if they don't get a deal. Okay, well, you're not going to get a deal. They're not going to accept your premise for this deal. Now what? Does he really go for that attack? Or does he send Israel to do the attacking? Israel has already said, we're going to attack you. But the Pentagon has already said themselves, we're going to attack you. And I don't believe for a moment that Israel is going to attack Iran without the U.S. permission. And so whatever happens is going to be done under the auspices of the U.S. government. And I guess my thing is that going to be a bag that Donald Trump is going to be left holding?
Well, I mean, absolutely. And again, if you read the Which Path to Persia policy paper from 2009, it talks about absolutely all of this. And so the purpose of diplomacy, and this is what they say, there's an entire chapter. I think there's actually maybe 2 chapters on making a deal with Iran. The whole point of making a deal with Iran is to make it appear as if the U.S. is seeking the diplomacy. And it was Iran determined to acquire nuclear weapons for all the wrong reasons that ultimately forced the U.S. to act. The U.S. didn't want to act. But Iran left them with no choice. That was the point of diplomacy. When the policy paper itself admits Iran doesn't want war with the U.S. or with Israel, if they were to get nuclear weapons, they would never use them. It's for deterrence because they've had their neighbors to the east and west of them invaded and occupied by the U.S. for two decades now. And so they have to provoke a war with Iran. Even says in the paper, there's a sentence where it says something like, it would be difficult to goad Iran into a conflict without the rest of the world recognizing the game. This is the type of language in these. That's why I beg people to please read these papers. At least read spot check it. Go jump around. You don't have to read it from cover to cover. But let's just take a step back from all of that. If President Trump didn't want to hold this bag, Iran, this conflict with Iran, all he had to do was just keep his nose out of it. Who nominated the United States, the police of the Middle East, and arbiter of what Iran is doing within its own borders?
Agreed.
Nobody. It was none of America's business. The only reason the U.S. is sticking its nose into Iran's business is because it wants this war in the first place, and they need to create a contacts, and they're going to do it by pretending that they tried to negotiate with Iran, and Iran refused. And it also has an entire chapter titled "Leave It to Bibi," encouraging or agreeing to something like approving of an Israeli strike. And it's all about how we could get Israel to strike Iran and have America appear to have washed its hands of all of it. But just as you say, it's not that Israel needs to get America's approval. There's no technical way they can carry out an effective strike without the U.S. aiding in absolutely every single way. Their warplanes are from the United States. Their munitions are from the United States. They need refueling capabilities from the United States. So no part of this happens without the U.S. being actively involved. The paper notes this, even back in 2009. Not much has changed since then. And so this is where we find ourselves. Plus, then you have this conflict. The U.S. is waging war against Yemen, and they're tying it to Iran. So every part of this screams duplicity and betrayal of President Trump's America First agenda, the concept of him being a peacemaker. Every single part of this is turned on its head, 180 degrees. Yeah. And you just have to open your eyes and accept that this was the plan from the beginning. Before President Trump ever stepped foot in office, Project 2025, published in 2023, Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea, and actually many other countries are all on a list that the U.S. was going to deal with under a conservative presidential administration. And all Project 2025 is an addition to these other policy papers that I'm constantly referencing and reading from. So it was always the plan, and it's just a matter of convincing Americans to go along with it.
Brian, you are fantastic. I swear to God, you are, man. Brian Berletic. He is Bangkok-based geopolitical researcher, writer, and host and creator of the new Atlas on YouTube. Definitely check him out. It is a fantastic show. This is just the taste, right? Thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it, Brian.
Thank you.
You be safe, all right? All right. Wow. Wow. Great guest. Really great guest. And going from one great guest to another. We are joined with Dr. Jim Kavanagh. Dr. Jim Kavanagh is a left socialist analyst and writer. You can find his work featured on Polemicist at .substack. You can also find him on Counterpunch here and on Garland's show and Press TV, by the way. Dr. Kavanagh, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing okay, yeah. And you're right, Brian is a great guy. He's very smart and he's doing great work. People should pay attention to him.
Oh man, yeah. The policy paper thing is,
yep.
He, like, as he points out, he's like, I'm not a psychic. I didn't, this wasn't like, me
they
just
write it all down.
Yeah, right. It's like that is the wild part, right? Yeah. Like they write that stuff out. It's like, we need to attack Iran. We need to go after Russia. And you think to yourself, it's like, but they know that other countries can read those policy papers. It's not like there's magic ink that only an American eyes can see it, right?
But it shows you how confident they are of controlling the narrative in the United States and controlling the American mind and the American public. Even though it's down there, it's written down there, the media apparatus kind of makes it invisible and makes it hard to see and presents you with another story, and you believe that other story, which is entirely false.
They give you another narrative, and then they fight for that narrative, right? Yeah, it's just amazing to me that that's the way they operate, but that is indeed the way they operate. Yeah. I wanted to bring you on because I was curious about Donald Trump is effectively waging this weird tariff war. It is not going well, regardless of him waving his hands, and pretending magically that it's like there's no spoon. It's that type of thing, right? There's no spoon. Don't worry, there is no spoon. Everything is going great. And he's been doing this in one interview after the next. It is the wildest thing in the world to watch.
Yeah.
Like he says, yeah, people, they don't need 30 doll babies. It's like, who's buying 30 doll babies? Like, that is the weirdest way of trying to explain why your prices are going up. And when the reporter points out to him, it's like, okay, so you admit that they can't afford those 30 doll babies, right? The prices are going up. Well, no, I'm not saying that. It's like, dude, you can't have it both ways. But he would say it both ways in an interview. You can see the dollar collapsing in value. You could see where the markets have lost like trillions of dollars in value. And you get Scott Bensent seemingly begging China, saying China should give us a call. We need a call from China. I was like, dude, China's not calling you. It's not going to happen. So, you know, what I'm curious about, though, is even if I accept that his original premise is right, like, okay, we're losing manufacturing. We've been deindustrialized. People who are making $20 an hour are now working at, I don't know, 7-Eleven or Subway making $8 an hour. Like, this is deleterious to society. It's not in our best interest. We're 30-something trillion dollars in debt. What is the socialist answer to that? Like, meaning, and I understand that that's like, hey, here's this flaming bag. I'm handing it to you. Now I need you to figure this out. I get that, right?
Yeah.
But how is there this kind of socialist leftist response to this if, you know, you had power in order to kind of push it through? I know the markets are going to freak out, but whatever.
Yeah.
How would you go about doing something like this from a leftist point of view?
Oh, well, you know, first of all, I'd make sure everybody has their $30 because I want my $30.
Right. My 1,000 pencils, or whatever the hell he said.
250 pencils.
Yeah. It's outrageous.
Yeah. But look, this requires social planning. Okay. You know, socialism is a matter of ultimately workers of power, of the working class running the country on behalf of itself, which is the majority of people. Okay. We don't have that situation. We have a situation in which, you know, to put it broadly speaking, you know, from a socialist point of view, you run an economy and arrange an economy, which is not just a set of numbers, but it's the way people live, their material lives. And you arrange a situation in which people have good material security. They have homes, they have place to live, they have decent work, they have nice standards of living, they have healthcare, they have education, you can go on vacation, you take care of your kids, raise your kids. I mean, these are all things that are not, you know, 200 years ago, that was utopian nonsense, or not, you know, I mean, but the capitalism, the socialist critique of capitalism has produced the possibility of doing all. Capitalism has created tremendous productivity of labor, and we are able to produce a lot of things. And we have a big society. We have a lot of resources. You know, we're not a small island country. So we can do these things, you know, and one of the things, I mean, look, that it's not even necessarily socialist, but it's kind of the preconditions of socialism. We'd have healthcare, we'd have a job guarantee, we'd have a housing guarantee. These things Franklin Roosevelt talked about, you know. So and really just we restrict the prerogatives of capital. You restrict interest rates. This is not impossible. Not impossible. It used to be the case. 25% interest is usurious. It was against the law. So you know you can do it. That you have public banking, so you have public credit. But we don't have. We have a society. Not only is it does the government take the position that the general principle of the society is not that we create good living conditions for everybody and good material lives for everybody. The first principle of society is that we create the conditions under which individuals can amass infinite amount of wealth. And that's the purpose of our society, to create those conditions. So you've got to get the principle down first. And that's and we got to realize that's the society. The latter is the society we're living in. We like the idea that Elon Musk has $300 billion, that 10 people in society own as much wealth as the bottom 50%, you know, and 20% owns 90% of the wealth. That's crazy. So and it's not this is not human nature. That's the way society is organized.
Yeah.
And you got to get away from that idea. And the problem in the United States fundamentally is that people, everyone down to the working class, is imbued with this idea. Oh, I'm going to someday Shark Tank, I'll get my $1 billion if I just stay on that's the purpose of society, that I can have the fantasy of being a billionaire someday and kind of figure out a way of doing it. If you don't get away from that, what I say is that there has to be a movement of the working class based on a kind of understanding of society that the majority of people hold and understand and aren't fooled by the narratives, which one of the narratives is, when we don't want to invade Iran, but we do want to invade Iran. The other narrative is, oh, I could become a billionaire. No, you can't. and the purpose of society isn't for you to become a billionaire. It's for all of us to have nice houses and to have good lives and not to be struggling. We can't pay the rent. I mean, it's crazy. I saw someone yesterday, a good tweet yesterday. Yes, someone who works a full-time job, whether even it's at McDonald's, should be able to afford the rent, should be able to afford to go to school, should be able to raise their kids. And this is what was promised after World War II in American capitalism. And there was a period of prosperity where things like that were possible for a large section of the working class, but that's gone away. And it went away because 40 years ago, for the reason, America didn't deindustrialize by magic. The American capitalists, China didn't steal anything from us. Nobody stole anything from us. American capitalists who have the right in this country to control massive amounts of wealth. And that doesn't just mean money. It means I can take my factory and move it over here.
Mm-hmm.
It's material production. They control the process of material production of valuable, enormously important goods and services. I'll take my factory and move it to China because I'll make more money doing that. So that's a whole process that went on for 30, 40 years. So I want to say, from the socialist point of view, it's a good question. And fundamentally, we have to get back to the idea of socialism, not of society. We are a society. Money, as I said, is a social tool created by society for social purposes.
Yes.
Factories, electricity generation, transportation, these are socially created things. Milton Friedman used to do the thing where he'd hold up a pencil. I used to do it in my class and say, this pencil, 250, one pencil, this is a social product. Look at all the even in this little pencil, there's wood, there's carbon, there's the eraser, there's metal. This required transportation. This is not some individual tinkering. This is a social product that requires a society that has structures and laws and plans, but we've given all that up. We don't have social planning. It's against the rules to think social. What we do is the government says, oh, we should have public transportation. So let's put out bids for contracts.
Yeah.
And we'll let Elon Musk figure out how to do public transport. No. Yeah. China builds 10,000 miles of railway, high-speed railway. We don't have anything like it. They came from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they were dirt poor. Now they're futuristic cities and public. That's because, and they don't, in fact, there's a lot of capitalism in China, but it's socially organized. It's socially planned. There's social direction. If they want to create, and this is what's happening, they want to industrialize. There's a social plan for industrialization, which is backed up by the capital investment of the state, which is unlimited. and not by, and yeah, they make room for capital investments from private, and they actually use that process in a certain way. I'm not quite sure what to call China, but you see there's a social project and people understand this is a social thing that we have to plan and we have to do. So we don't have these things because the people who control the country, which is not the working class, elections are baloney. There's a process by which you get to, again, think that you're controlling something that you're not controlling at all. You have no input into. The reason we have Donald Trump as a president is because the Democratic Party spent three election cycles doing everything it could to defeat the left in the party. Okay. They deliberately set out. The reason we had Joe Biden, who was a failure and was a liar, and the Democratic Party spent years lying to people about his mental condition. Yes. And lying. They knew about it. They did not know about it. They knew about it. And the media, and they lied. And not only lied about it, they attacked people who said anything about it. And Biden was a disaster, and the Democrats were a disaster. And they put Joe Biden in to stop Bernie Sanders. They didn't put him in to stop Donald Trump.
Right there.
They didn't do that. They put the Democratic Party's project has been to stop the left, and that's what it is. That it's the corral to keep the left from leaving away from the control of the capitalist oligarchs who control the Democratic Party.
You can say shit show if that's what you wanted to say. That's perfectly fine.
Oh yeah, shit show at the least. So anyway, in terms of what I would do, I can give you 10 policies that don't actually overthrow capitalism. Well, they create what I'd call a social democratic order that would win every election. Guaranteed housing, guaranteed jobs, healthcare. Stop these goddamn wars. Stop being Israel's little doggy, little female dog. Stop being, every single one of those Middle East wars was for Israel. We got to end our support for Zionism. That's not an American project. That's a colonial Jewish supremacist project. It's Jewish supremacism over Palestinian Arabs. And the West and Americans have accepted that as something which is good. And that's why it's still there. Because white supremacism over black Africans, which was accepted for centuries, not suddenly, but because of the anti-colonial struggles and the West and Americans and the liberal West had to give that up and oppose it. So that's why South African apartheid ended, because the West learned it had to oppose to protect capitalism in a certain way, but it also, it could not anymore stand to abide this blatant racism, this blatant white supremacism over black Africans. The black Africans had fought it off throughout the rest of Africa, and they couldn't hold on to, and they had to force the white South Africans to give up apartheid. The West abandoned them, and went against them. And until and unless the West, the American people, and the West, and American liberal intellectuals and liberal politicians go against Zionism, go against Jewish supremacism over Palestinian Arabs in the way they did against white supremacism over black Africans. That's what's supporting Zionism and this absolute horrible slaughter that we're watching. This is Nazi stuff. This is Leopold in the Congo. This is no excuse for this. And this is the horror of the 20th century. They're now deliberately starving children to death. They're deliberately sniping, killing children. Now they're deliberately starving children to death. And we are part of it. And we are part of it because we accept in our minds the idea of Jewish supremacy over Palestinian Arabs. And everybody has to understand that's what it is. You can't do this unless you're accepting that in your mind. Okay? And when you get that out of your mind, then you'll be really pissed off. And then you'll say, stop this. But the American political elite is absolutely committed to that. They're committed to Jewish supremacy over Palestinian Arabs. They're committed to that. And just like they were committed for centuries to white supremacy over black Africans and blacks in the South, and so you got to go. And any liberal who thinks you can just forget about that, put to the side and let Jewish supremacists kill Palestinian children because that's not important, then really screw you. That's just baloney. That's horror. So we're doing it. We're not just letting them do it. We're doing it. Because we hold that supremacist premise in our head. Anyway, so that's not even socialism. That should just be given, right? That should be. As a socialist point of view, I would put out certain policies that would help people immediately. Stop cap interest rates. Donald Trump talked about it. He said he would cap interest rate at 10%. That was one of the best things he's ever said. Where is it? Where is it? He's not controlling things. Donald Trump, the president of the United States, is one of my great quotes I like to pull out. They're from the 60s or 70s. This guy was the head of Avis. He said, there are about 20,000 people control the country. He named the groups who were the bankers, the blah, blah, blah. The president of the United States is head towel boy. And that's what he is. And Donald Trump admits it. He got up and he said, I had Miriam and Sheldon Adelson running the White House. They were in the White House more than the people who work there. They would tell me what to do, and I did it.
He gave her a reward and said that this medal is more important than the medals that we give soldiers who get injured in battle. I mean, it's just outrageous stuff.
So anyway, from the point of view, so first thing, but again, the working class has to mobilize to take power for creating a society that runs on certain principles and not the ones that, and the working class has to understand this. And this is the deep problem of society. You know, those who are getting screwed over don't understand why they're getting screwed over. And we have this tremendous impulse here, you know, to attach ourselves to someone who comes along as a tough guy or a plain spoken, I'm telling it like it is, I'm the guy who's, you know, and the Democrats failed entirely. And 90% of the Republicans were saying about the Democrats was true. And you know, over the past 8 years. So there's, you know, and people were looking for something. People's lives haven't improved. As you say, everybody knows this. You know, there used to be a union job as a steel worker or an auto worker. It was a family wage. It was a one wage. The entire family, you could have a vacation, you could buy a car, buy a boat. You know, you had a house that you really could afford. None of that. All that's gone. And it's gone because look at what Obama did in 2009 in the financial crisis. And I have as an avatar, I will put it back. And I used to have it in all my things, but I have it on some of them now. The Newsweek cover story from 2009. We're all socialists now because they all knew the government has to come in and bail out. What were capitalist enterprises? These were bad bets by capitalists who said, oh, I take a risk. That's why I deserve to run the country. You took the risk. You were losing. Obama came in and said, I'm here to prevent the pitchforks. I'm here to stand between you and the pitchforks. And that's what he did. He took a situation and he saved the capitalists. He saved the wealthy who had made bad bets. He let people who had been thrown out of their homes. He destroyed black businesses. Black wealth declined relatively under Obama. And there was a gradual continual decrease of the state of social security in the widest sense of the working class. And what happened was he could have kept people in their homes and said, okay, you lost some of your equity in your home. We're going to renegotiate the mortgages based on the real value of the homes now. But you can stay in your homes. You've paid a mortgage. No, what he did was kick out of the homes and let private equity come in and buy the homes and hedge funds come in to buy the homes and kick people out of their jobs. So there's a whole screw of thing. Anyway, the Democrats who supposedly represent the working class don't. And they're there to prevent the working class from bringing their pitchforks to the Capitol. And so we have to organize, but it's very hard because the election arena is a duopoly that's controlled by them in an absolutely strict way. You can't get on ballots. You can't get into the media. You can't blah, 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 blah. You're just controlled. You cannot build. You can't even get a primary someone in the Democratic Party. They wouldn't allow that.
It takes
and
so
look
much
what they
money.
did so you're being controlled. The political process is controlled in a way that prevents the rise of an alternative within the electoral sphere. And that's very important. Not that electoral politics is the most important thing necessarily, but if you have no avenue for contest within the electoral, then what do you do? You know, you can't. So we have a very strictly controlled political system and media system, and it makes it very difficult to figure out how to move forward. Anyway, I'm ranting, but go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just going to point out Tim Walz, the not VP, the one that failed to be VP.
Yeah.
He came out with a comment that maybe there was a solution that we are not necessarily paying attention to. I'm going to let Tim Walz make his point.
And I think after the fact, it is not second guessing or anything. I think it's fair to go back on and look at this. Look, we had the most qualified person who'd run for president in this country's history at the top of the ticket. That in itself should have got this thing won. We had, in my opinion, and you can disagree with me, I think history will prove me right, a very unqualified person on the other side.
She's not the most qualified
Person in the history of American politics. I mean, FDR, LBJ, George Washington, the most qualified person in the history of American politics, Kamala Harris. Oh, we could have had the most qualified person in the world. It's stuff like this that aggravates the hell out of me. And I want to show you one more video.
Yeah.
This is what is his name? What is his name? Governor of California, Newsom. Newsom is coming to an appraisal that the problem is that people were woke. That's the issue. People were just woke. And if people were less woke, then we Democrats could have totally won it. I think that they're coming to ludicrous conclusions, as opposed to, as you point out, hey, maybe you should have done something for the actual population. And maybe they would have put you in office if they believed that their vote mattered and was translated to something in regards to a house, healthcare, education, a higher wage, etc. He is going with this woke stuff as if that is the issue. People were just woke.
We lost the popular vote and we lost the electoral vote. We got crushed, and we need to be humble about that, and we need to have some grace, and we need to understand why. Was it because of the incumbency penalty? Was it because of inflation? Was it because of interest rates? Was it because of immigration? Was it because we were too, quote unquote, woke? Was it because of the issues with Israel? Was it all of the above? I think we are going through that forensic. We need to understand it. At the same time, we also have to push back against the whitewaters and headwinds of the Trump administration.
Well, actually, that's not too bad. But he names a lot of things, and they're all true. They're all part. It is all of those things. Look,
I don't know what an incumbent penalty is. The incumbent usually has an advantage when they're running, not a penalty.
But as you say, look, Kamala Harris was the most qualified person, but Joe Biden was the most qualified person. He's as sharp as a tack. He's never been sharper. Hannity was Hannity or Morning Joe. The sharpest, most intellectually precise I've ever seen him. And fuck you if you don't believe that. So that's what these people were doing. They were lying. That's just lies. He knew that was not true when he said it. Okay, so this idea, look, they're also, Donald Trump is incompetent. We see that. They built Donald Trump into precisely what the people wanted, an anti-establishment warrior.
Yep.
They built him into that. I spent years with Garland and Wilmer and John Kiriakou on Sputnik Radio saying, what are they doing? They're turning Donald Trump into a hero. Let Donald Trump say what he wants to do. And if he says what he wants to do, people will say, what the hell are you talking about? $30? What? Tariffs? That's what you want to do? But no, what they did was they spent since 2016 impeaching him, attacking him, Russians are behind him, let's put him in jail for cheating on overvaluing his real estate. They changed the law in New York so they could go after him for libel for Jean Carroll. They had to change the law to do that. They made him into I'm an establishment hero. Look, I'm their enemy. You don't like them? Enemy of your enemy. So they turned him into this figure that was powerful, important, and strong. And he's not. He's actually incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing. He gets pushed around by people who, come talk to him and flatter him. But they turned him into a political figure of such importance and anti-establishment. He was the only anti-establishment figure that the Democrats and the media allowed to be anti-establishment. They wouldn't let Bernie Sanders go, and Bernie Sanders himself succumb and bent the knee to the Democratic Party and shut himself up and didn't talk about health care while his friend Joe Biden was running the country. So, Donald Trump is a creation of the Democratic policies and Democratic media. And it was the Democrats who turned wokeness into their program because they didn't have another program. Where did universal health care go? No, we got to have trans women in sports, in men's sports. What? In girls' sports. What? So you have an argument. They wanted those arguments because they don't want an argument about let's cap interest rates. Let's have 94% tax on incomes over $3.5 million. The tax rate in 1944, 45, 1991, 94%. And this was accepted by capitalists because the purpose of those taxes, the marginal tax rate on incomes above $200,000, which is about the equivalent of $3.5 million today, was 94%. And the capitalist, the chair of I keep going back to this, the chair of the Federal Reserve of the New York Fed wrote an article called "Taxes for Revenue Are Obsolete." We don't need taxes for the revenue. We have a fiat money system now, but we have taxes in order to prevent inequality and to prevent inflation. So anybody who makes over $200,000, every dollar over that is taxed at 94%. And they accepted that because they knew going into World War II and coming out of World War II, when communism and socialism was powerful, the ideology of communism and socialism was powerful among the working class. They knew they couldn't allow that inequality. So that's the purpose of those taxes. The working class should not be taxed. People should not be taxed below minimum wage. They're not creating inequality. Those incomes aren't creating inequality or inflation. It's higher incomes that are creating inequality and inflation. And they should be heavily taxed. And they were in this country in the height of our prosperity. From years after that, it was 91% until John Kennedy came in and said, I want to cut taxes. The Democratic president came in and started the tax cutting for the wealthy. So that's what happened. And people accepted 90% marginal tax rates on high incomes. And there's no reason not to. Nobody needs more than $3.5 million a year. And that's public money. It's not private. It's not taxpayer money. It's publicly created social tool that's there to facilitate production and distribution of goods and make sure everybody gets them and has access to it. It's not there to be hoarded by 5 people or 10 people. That's socially destructive. And we have the right to say, no, you can't hoard that money. We're taking it from you. And because we want to use that money as a tool to distribute real social wealth and social values and social goods and services. So anyway, these are the things we can do, but it's an overcoming now an a whole ideological atmosphere in the country. And as I say, sinking down through every level of society, bling, bling, go through it, black, white.
I mean, like, I know in rap, for example, and I get it on some level. You have this hypermasculinity. You have these are the women, these are my cars. Here's my gold chain.
Yeah, bling, bling.
That goofball at the Met Gala came out with a piano on his back, and it's like, okay, man,
I missed that.
It's like this is so over the top, right? For blacks, I get it, just because they were denied those things for so long.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if you've seen Django, where he gets a suit and it's just like bright, like over the top thing because he was a slave. He didn't have that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. But I agree with you that there's an ideological hurdle in this country that is over the top. I mean, like, they don't think of it in the way that you think about it. They think of it in a sense of, okay, I did something wrong. I have messed up. And maybe they did mess up, right?
Yeah.
But if you are sitting at your home as a child without lights, okay, that might not be you, right? If you're using a candle to do homework, that's a disadvantage built into you that you have to get over in order to get any kind of productivity as a person in society. There's a great disparity between homes. I use the example of Bill Cosby. There's a very big difference between Bill and Claire Huxtable and their kids versus somebody who's growing up in a household where a person makes minimum wage. And it's not just money, it's what the money allows, the vacations, the ability to see the world, the political connections, even just the notion of I could be a doctor like my dad, or I could be a lawyer like my mom. That is a big deal. And those things are like, the disparity is great in this stuff. And it's like, it is very hard to get people to see that side of it. They see the side of it from this kind of capitalistic imperative. Well, I have to work this much. I have to do X, Y, Z. I pay my taxes, so people should pay theirs. I only make $15 an hour, so why should the fry cook make $15 an hour? It is a weird way that we go with this.
Not thinking socially, we're thinking individually and completely individually. It's either my fault or it's my success.
Right. I did it all myself, or I failed all on my own.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a terrible psychological state for people to be in, because that's why you have such the fentanyl addiction. People are just, they do, the social conditions aren't there to allow everybody to have a decent job and a decent life. But they blame it on their individual failures, okay? And individual actions contribute to it. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But you've got to understand that, you know, societies create conditions that allow masses of people to move in certain ways or not, okay? And yes, there's still a racial disparity in this country. But what the white ruling class of this country learned in the 60s and 70s, the day after, especially the day after the riots or uprisings in Newark and Detroit and Los Angeles, and they had a commission, the Kerner Commission, and you know there were uprisings and rebellions that were from Martin Luther King's massive peaceful civil disobedience to armed uprisings in the South. Robert Williams, Negroes with Guns, Charles Cobb, this nonviolent stuff will get you killed, the Black Panthers, and they were arming themselves. And then there were serious riots, and the white ruling class of the country said, when there were the riots, especially after the king said, this is over. We have to end American apartheid. And white ruling class of the South obeyed. You're going to obey this. George Wallace turned around and we're going to end American apartheid. And what that had to mean, materially speaking, is we have to allow the creation of a Black middle class, of a Black professional managerial class. We have to allow, you know, Black people who previously, you know, when they gained some kind of wealth and we lynched them and took their property. That's over now. We're going to put them in the front of society and say, look, they're getting wealthy too, and they can keep their wealth and they can grow their wealth and they can own sports teams, etc. So that's very important, and it's a good thing. You know, I've watched this change in my lifetime. I'm going to say, I understand that I'm older enough than people don't quite understand how radical this was. I didn't even know it, but it was part of my life that was just impossible when I was a kid. All of a sudden, you know, the change that's happened in that respect is wonderful and it's great. And that creates a kind of self-reproducing thing, because there's enough Black wealth among the middle class, upper middle, call it what we call the middle class, but you know, there are pockets of Black wealth that are gonna regenerate, because there's a legacy, and kids are growing up saying, I can be a doctor, or I can be a scientist, or I can be the president of the United States. It's not at all a problem. And there's even been a kind of, among white kids, and white culture, a valorization of Black culture, and you know, of Blackness in a certain way. So all of this is but the majority of Black people, you know, this you still have, I mean, but it's not just Black people, it's Black and white people. And this is everybody. That's one of the things white working class resents. Oh, why are people talking about the horrors of our life? And it's a good question, because they weren't deemed as threatening in the same way. Now they are. But and the reaction of some white working class people is going to be racist, etc. This is all, but this is you're not solving the social problems. You tried to solve the racial problem, and you did make great efforts in changing the racial dynamic of the country in a certain way, but you changed it somewhat and in an important way materially, allowing the creation of a Black middle class, and allowing us and preventing a situation where Black people would be prevented from accumulating any kind of wealth or any kind of social security. You know, what's the famous town in Oklahoma, the terrible right, you know, where there were.
Oh, I knew you talking about the Oklahoma, the riots.
Yeah, right. And Woodrow Wilson, racist son of a bitch. I mean, he fired the Blacks from federal jobs. I mean, these were the jobs that people would be able to have good salaries and have decent. He fired them because he was a racist bastard. Okay, so this was more centuries of keeping Black people from having any kind of social security and material security. So that has been eliminated in the sense that, you know, There are black conservatives and black wealthy people, and nobody says they shouldn't be wealthy because they're black or we're going to take that money from, etc. But the material reality for the black working class is, well, the best job. What are the best jobs for black working class now? That's interesting and tells you the change. What are the best jobs for the black or the white working class, for that matter? Cops.
Really?
Cops, right? That's a job. You have a salary. You have good benefits. You have a union. Look at all the black rappers whose fathers are cops, right? I mean, that's become a job that wasn't a job for black people till 50 years ago, right? Now, look at the police departments and the chiefs of police and et cetera. I mean, this is one of the issues that we have. That's okay. We want you to come in and be cops, right? And that's one of the best working class jobs that remains in this country. To be a cop, you have a good job. You have a secure job. You get benefits. You have a pension, right? Killer Mike. I remember that when the Atlanta riots and the black white woman mayor got up and said, "You're rioting against the people who own that property are black people." And Killer Mike owns half of that neighborhood. Killer Mike, yeah, my father's a cop or my mother's a cop. So these are things that you got to realize and that embeds the ideology further. Okay, so you have a whole system, but the social reality of life for the majority of black people, the majority of white people who aren't, you don't have college degrees, let alone advanced degrees,
right,
who don't have relatives who can get them good jobs. And there are no good jobs. There are no jobs. And, there's no more good jobs in good union jobs that people, they're very, very few. They're diminishing and diminishing. So you don't have family wages. And they make one mistake and they get arrested. And then their lives are fucked forever.
Yep.
And they're going to be on fentanyl and they're going to be on drugs and blah, 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 blah. So these are the things that are absolutely part of the white and black working class and sub-working class now. And that social reality is just ignored and treated as a set of individual problems and individual failures. Oh, no, he's a thug, or he's a redneck and he's a stupid redneck, or he's a nasty thug, and blah blah blah. Whatever you want to say, however you want to characterize it, and it still gets characterized racially in certain ways, and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And that all just prevents anybody from working together to put a stop to it.
Do you see that changing? Like, do you see, I think you said something very interesting. You said, yeah, it didn't seem like that was going to change until it did. Like, it just seemed impossible. It just seemed like this is just reality up until the point where it actually changed. And look, I can't see around corners, but there are corners.
Yeah.
Do you see that tilting in some way, where there's a point where it's like things are so bad that not doing anything is worse than doing something?
Well, look, I first of all, I think that's one very good thing to say, that you can't eliminate the possibility of surprise. Surprises come. But what I'm saying is that the racial politics and the status of black people in this country didn't change by accident. That was a program.
Right.
That was a program. Right. And because they knew it was necessary, because they didn't want there was a fear of there's a song, fear of black power, fear of something, but it was not just black power, but there was a fear of revolution. There was a fear of, and so they changed things and it was a program for that. Okay. But the program was limited. So what I'm interested in is not another program. They'll figure out something that they'll try to do. Okay. And what they're going to do is probably, let's say the most radical version of it. And this is not in terms of racial politics, but this is in terms of the general political socialist politics. We're going to give everybody a UBI. We're going to give everybody a universal basic income. We'll give you $2,000 a month. And watch then all of a sudden they'll stop where we get the money thing, because they know they can do that. They can do that tomorrow. We'll give everybody $2,000 a month, but not you still got to buy your own health care, or most of it. You still got to do this. You still got to do that. And we're going to continue to run the show and suck up all the rest of the wealth for ourselves. Okay. So that's maybe the kind of thing they're going to do. And people like that. Oh, wow, that's good. So, I don't know. That's one thing. But this is the point. This is a matter of I don't want there to be, I want people to get together and work to take power. This is not about money. Money is part of it, but money is a subset of the power. And this is what the social democratic countries, look at Europe, the Scandinavian countries, social democracy and good progressive social policies came into being because there was a fear of the working class taking power. And at the end of the day, the capitalists will always say, we'll give you everything we want, everything you want. We'll give you the wage. We'll give you the vacation. Just leave us in power so that we take the profits. And okay, we'll share as much of those we can with you, but we own this. And so that's, and so if you look at the Scandinavian countries, especially, they could have taken power. No, we're going to give you everything. When I was organizing graduate student union, when I was in graduate school, we had a demand that we had guaranteed jobs, teaching assistant jobs. And they, at the end of the day, said, we'll give you all teaching assistant jobs, but we're not going to guarantee it. We have the power. So they will buy you off. They will buy you off with good things. So what I'm saying is they'll figure something to do. Or they'll crush. Now they're turning around to just plain we'll put you in jail. We're going to put you in jail if you oppose Zionism. That's one thing. They're absolutely adamant about, we can't allow an anti-Zionist movement one is developing, and we can't allow that to continue. We've got to keep people not thinking about their attachment to Jewish supremacism over our Jewish colonial supremacism. We don't want people thinking about that, so you can't even talk about it. This is a problem. But in terms of the general material well-being of society, it's a problem for them. And I think that the UBI is going to be one of the things, and we should have a UBI, but we should have a job guarantee. People should have jobs. People should have health care. People should have there should be housing provided. You can build it. And again, it's not the money. You can build it. There's at least 6 or 7 empty houses right now for every unhoused person in the United States. Okay. And this is a matter of social polity, but it's a matter of who controls the polity, and the polity and the means of production, the means of building things, are controlled by individuals who are controlling it in a way that continues to preserve their ability to amass as much wealth as they want. And it has to be controlled by the society as a whole, by the majority of people, for the purpose of making sure that the majority of people have good lives, and using whatever materials we have in our society and whatever skills we have, and it's a lot in our society, to make sure that everybody has a good life. And nobody should have 5 homes when there are 1 million people who don't have any.
Yeah, looking at you, Elon Musk, or some random, person with that, it's so much wealth.
I'm boring you to death.
No, you're not. No, I swear to God, you're not. It has been a long morning, to put it mildly. There's so much wealth in this country. I mean, Elon Musk is going to be the first trillionaire. Put it in perspective, right? That is an astonishing amount of money for one person to effectively have.
And it's power.
Yeah, and it equals power. I mean, even the political, Donald Trump right now is getting money from foreign sources into his coins. He's lining his pockets with cash. And I think that's the ultimate contradiction in the society, that we have a society that's organized around making as much money as possible, using their money for political clout, and effectively ignoring the working class, or having a dog and pony show for elections, when really it's the power that's concentrated and dumped into the political system. Yep. And it's that doesn't work. FDR, okay, he might have been able to, as he quote, saved capitalism, but it was short-lived. I mean, the communist Soviet Union fell apart. China exists, but China is this kind of weird quasi-communist that rides the bull of capitalism for its own, for its own betterment. But it doesn't work here. And we can see it politically, like Joe Biden being president, Trump being president. Both of these people are radically incompetent. We can see a political system that can't even pass a budget. And then when they do pass a budget, it is just raping the population. They are taking nearly $1 trillion from Medicaid. That is astonishing. They're destroying Social Security, firing the world's richest man, firing all of these federal workers from jobs.
Yeah.
And that's what they think is perfectly okay. We don't believe the public is going to do anything about the fact that we're doing this at all.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because they may be right.
Yeah.
That's the sad part, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to change that per se. I'm curious on your take on Donald Trump. Like,
Let me just say one thing, because what you just pointed out is very important, and it's about class power, and this is precisely the point. They instituted they instituted the New Deal, they instituted social democratic parties in Europe, but the class in power was still the owners of capital. And this is why it's a question of power. It's not a question of numbers. It's a question of having the power to control the capital wealth of society and the production of wealth of society. And when you leave the capitalists in power, they will eventually come back. And even if they will come back, that's what's happened in this country. It's what's happened in Western Europe. They have the power. They're going to lay back for a while, but then they're going to come back. And having the wealth is a matter of having the power. They have the power. So it's a matter of taking power from the capitalist class, and there's nobody who owns, the electricity of the country. I mean, it's crazy. But anyway, for individual profit purposes.
By the way, I agree with you on that. I think it's outrageous that the federal government doesn't own the electricity grid, trains. Like, I find that stuff to be vital interests, like necessary for society. The last thing you want is a capitalist to be making profit off of that nonsense. I 1,000% agree with you on that.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were talking about Trump.
No, I was just like saying, like, how do you frame him in this way? Like, he has fascistic tendencies. The notion that he gets elected under a constitution, but apparently doesn't understand or believe in due process, which is, again, pretty astonishing that somebody would even say out loud. Is it that the contradictions have gotten so bad that he is the guy who ends up in charge, that the veneer of the capitalists or the veneer of the typical politician melts away? I mean, one of the weirdest things that I've seen under normal circumstances, billionaires, millionaires, these people don't necessarily show their faces in public. They tend to work behind the scenes. That is not the case anymore. Elon Musk out in front. Bloomberg literally ran in a race, believing, oddly enough, that the public was going to love him to death. He spent $1 billion in a primary only to get just crushed.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my thing is, it's not normal in our political system to see billionaires that much out front. Miriam Adelson getting a reward, where Donald Trump's like, hey, you're a fantastic American. Here's your thing. Thank you for the $100 million that you gave me. That is a weird quirk. And by the way, it's not like he's liked. Elon Musk has damaged his own company by being so unlikable. And yet, in his mind, the public's going to love me. It's bizarre. Trump, billionaire, run for president, wins. That's a strange twist on things with these people.
That is part. It's been for at least 20 years. It's part of American. They admire billionaires.
Yeah,
this is Shark Tank. They admire billionaires, and it's become. It's true. It's become more aggressively promoted, but it's billionaire populism, and they admire guys and gals who talk like that, who come across as one of them. And this is the crazy thing. Donald Trump comes across as talking like, because he says some things straight out. When he gets up on the stage in 2016 and says, hey, I know these guys are all bought off because I bought them. I donated to their point. So that's what people want to hear. They want to hear someone saying that. And he's absolutely right. He was loved by the Democrats. Oprah wanted him to run for president. He's a big pal of the Democrats. This is a big club, and you ain't in it. And he's not that rich, by the way. He gets by in billionaire terms, but he's a terrible businessman. he bankrupted casinos. You can't lose money on a casino.
Yeah, the house always wins, right? Until Trump wins it, right?
I used to play poker at the Taj Mahal. I actually shook his hand once in a walk through at the Taj Mahal. But so he's but he comes across in a certain way, and this is part of a bizarre ideological thing. People who speak in a certain way and who come across as populist, even if they're not, he has no idea what the lives of real people are like. $30, 250 pencils. What are you talking about? He has no idea what the lives of real people, and he doesn't have any idea seriously about politics and about international relations. I'm going to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. No, you're not. That's just silly. It's stupid. And to some extent, he believes all this stuff because he thinks, oh, if you're a guy like me, if you're a tough guy oh Jesus, is this coming on? If you're a tough guy like me, I'm seeing messages about battery saver. I'm afraid I'm not.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm seeing my messages. My computer, I think, is running out of power. If you talk tough and you talk, tell it like it is, everybody's going to admire. And that's an ideological problem in the United States. And the problem is, Donald Trump is incompetent. Joe Biden was incompetent. But the problem is they give you this choice between two incompetents, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, or an incompetent Donald Trump, who at least speaks in a way that makes you feel like he understands something of what your life is, and a total kind of creep like Hillary Clinton, who nobody likes or would like, and we know what her policies are, and they're terrible. So this is the situation we have, and it is controlled behind the scenes. People do not get to run for president unless they're going to continue unconditional support of Zionism, unless they're going to continue fighting for the American imperialism and the hegemony of American capitalism in the world. And that's Donald Trump's problem now. He's destroying the hegemony of American capitalism better than any of our leftists have ever done. And it's true. And they're going to turn against him. I would not at all be surprised to see Donald Trump go down, die of a heart attack,
before he even finishes
a heart attack, or another assassination. What he's doing to the American capitalist system is, on the one hand, wonderful in the world, because he's destroying but it was happening anyway. There was a decline of the power of American capitalism in the world, and he's just accelerating it immensely. And they're going to turn on him. I mean, again, people like Elon Musk, he has a lot of money. He's smart at certain things, but he's stupid at a lot of things. He's really stupid about a lot of things. You see this, but people, this is at every level of our society. You think people, you think celebrities, you think what they're like, and you find out, well, they're really assholes, or they're really stupid, or I thought this was a nice guy. And, and people who come across as tough guys on screen, turn out to be really gentle in public and in private, and blah, blah, blah. So, all of these things are true. And we are in a situation where in the political world, they create narratives about people, and they create narratives about policies, and that's what we're in. And it's very difficult to overcome, but we try, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Jim, man, thank you for this. I was super curious about, they're doing construction upstairs. It's bugging the hell out of me. I'm sorry. Thank you for this. I was super curious about how the socialist point of view looks at this. I mean, because this is a shit show. Yeah. I mean, the notion that you destroy trillions of dollars within a few weeks is amazing. Nobody would have ever thought of president coming in to do that. Or having a world war with tariffs and getting yourself into a trade war with China that you can't get out of.
Can't win.
And that your ego is so big that you can't pick up the phone and say, hey, Xi Jinping, we need to talk about this. Mm-hmm. Instead, it's like, Xi Jinping needs to call us. This is ludicrous, right? And to your point, where he's like, eggs are down, as if he does groceries.
Yeah.
As if Donald Trump is out there doing groceries or pumping gas in his car. He's not doing any of that stuff. He
Yeah.
bullshits his way through interview after interview after interview. And you think to yourself, okay, how long could that last? How long could a president do that and be that incompetent? I don't have an answer for that.
I don't either.
I think we're going to find out. There we are. Dr. Jim Kavanagh, leftist, socialist, analyst, and writer. You can find his work on polemicist.substack.com, counterpunch.com, another great outlet. And you can also find it here, his interviews with Garland and his interviews with Press TV. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate this.
Thank you for having me, Jamal. Always fun.
Be safe.
Always fun. Take it easy.
All righty. And we have another guest coming up. Koffi should be here shortly. What time is it? I apologize for the knocking. I don't have any control over that. That was not supposed to happen from 1 to 4. And apparently that is happening. So I am deeply annoyed. But the show must go on. And as the show must go on, I think I did the George Bush thing. So one of the other things that China, that they've ended up doing is pushing China closer to Europe. This. European Parliament in final stages of talks with China to remove sanctions on lawmakers. You know, one of the reasons I love talking to Brian Berletic is because regardless of all the plans that you write down, what happens in real life is different. And so you can write down on paper, hey, we're going to have a tariff war against the world, and we're going to be able to dominate the world with tariffs. And then what happens in real life is you end up in a trade war that you can't get out of, that you're going to lose and have been losing. Europe and China gets closer together. The European nations side with China. The other countries decide we are not going to side with the United States to go after China. And so you're isolated based on your own behavior. Okay, well, you being isolated wasn't in the trade paper. That wasn't part of the document, right? The part of the document they had was we can dominate the world. You've over-evaluated your capacity to do X and Y. And because you've over-evaluated your capacity to do X and Y based on something that somebody wrote down on a piece of paper, you are now in a world of shit where the market loses trillions of dollars, where on top of the market losing trillions of dollars, the dollar started losing value. Oh, that is... Okay, let's do this. I'm going to go to a clip of Jeffrey Sachs for a bit because I need to bitch like nobody's business to the person in charge. So this is on COVID. Jeffrey Sachs said something on COVID that has gotten a lot of airplay. And it's not just him. RFK Jr. also doubled down on this, saying that under Obama, they were effectively doing research into COVID. Now, Sachs has made the point of saying 99% certain that COVID came out the US. This is a clip. If I can get the clip right, let me make sure it's going to play.
So a little surprising. And I have to admit, what I'm about to tell you is only 99. I'll tell you a sad truth. Also a little surprising. And I have to admit, what I'm about to tell you is only 99% sure. But my view, based on very extensive work over the last 4.5 years, is that COVID came from the University of North Carolina, which is the leading researcher on beta coronaviruses, working with the US government on a set of grant proposals that identified putting in the viral change that created SARS-CoV-2. It's a grim truth. It's ugly. It's been hidden from view. The reason I mention it in this context is we don't have any global governance that is effective right now to control the manipulation of dangerous pathogens like the manipulation that created the pandemic. And when it happened, and officially it took 7 million deaths, but probably if you count all of the deaths associated with COVID. It was probably closer to 20 million deaths. Even when that happens, it's never properly investigated. It's covered up. It's hidden from view.
This is a big claim. It's the first time that I
Yes.
hear it. Can you tell us a bit more about this? How and why? And
I want to piggyback this with RFK Jr., who effectively doubled down on this clip.
More virulent, more transmissible, and more deadly. You know, as you pointed out, gain-of-function studies are the kind of science that is designed to make microbes and pathogens more virulent, more transmissible, and more deadly. It was in this country, they started doing it in 1947, the military and the intelligence agencies, in order to develop bioweapons. In 1969, President Nixon banned it all, shut down Fort Detrick, shut down all the labs. That ban, and then signed the Bioweapons Convention. That ban lasted till 2001. And after the anthrax attacks, Anthony Fauci began, essentially restarted the arms race and the bioweapons arms race, and did it under the pretension of developing vaccines, because of the same science that you develop bioweapons and vaccines. In 2014, 3 of his bugs escaped, and 300 scientists wrote letters to President Obama asking him to shut down Anthony Fauci. President Obama declared a moratorium, but instead of shutting down his experiments, he moved them offshore, mainly to the Wuhan lab. And now, you know, the principal institutions of our government, the CIA, the FBI, the State Department, Department of Energy, all say that it is most likely that those experiments resulted in the COVID-19 pandemic beginning in 2019. So President Trump did.
That is an amazing admission. That is an amazing admission. He is implicating the US government in a virus that killed I don't even know how many millions around the world. And even if he's making a point of saying, well, we moved it to Wuhan. Okay, yeah, but it was US research that we moved to Wuhan that he is implicating in being the cause of COVID. That is astonishing. That is an amazing clip. And again, that clip is backed up by Jeffrey Sachs. So it's not like he's just saying this out the blue. Sachs is pointing out, I'm 99% sure that we did it. And RFK Jr. is coming out saying, yeah, it was our research that effectively was the cause of it. That's amazing. Koffi, man, welcome to the show. There is construction upstairs. I contacted the landlord, basically saying, dude, you said you weren't going to have it during the time of doing my show. So if there's no noise, I apologize. How are you doing? You doing okay today?
Yeah, very well. Nice and sunny in the capital city of South Africa and Pretoria.
Oh, nice and sunny. Koffi Kouakou, he's an African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Koffi, you are the guy I want to talk to today. I want to play a clip for you first before anything else. And this clip, powerful, it's inspiring, and he makes a damn good point in this clip that I think a lot of people ignore, and I would argue is part of the reason they're trying to take his life. This is Ibrahim Traore. I may be mispronouncing the last name. I apologize if I am. But the new leader for Burkina Faso, listen to what he says here.
Les questions que mes générations se posent sont les suivantes, si je peux me résumer. C'est de ne pas comprendre comment l'Afrique, avec tant de richesses sur notre sol, avec une nature généreuse, de l'eau, du soleil en abondance, l'Afrique est aujourd'hui le continent le plus pauvre. L'Afrique est un continent affamé. Et comment se fait-il que les chefs d'État traversent donc le monde à mendier? Voici des questions que nous nous posons et que nous n'avons pas de réponse jusque-là. Nous avons l'occasion de tisser de nouvelles relations.
His point is so on point, right? He's like, Africa is a rich continent. Like the amount of wealth that's in the African continent is astonishing. And the idea that we have to beg for help should be nonsense. It should be off the table. In which case, this thing is like when we ask ourselves questions of why do we not have possession of that wealth, we don't have answers for it. We need to forge a new way forward. Yeah, he's right.
Yes, I mean, Jamal, this is one of the most painful realization by many people, many Africans since the, slavery days, the United States back to the 60s and 20th century, 21st century. People are still asking themselves those questions, but we know the answers. The West has been very powerful in sneaking around, organizing itself by proxies and so forth, sometimes brutally doing it straight away. That's, brute force seems to be working, and they use it very well to sort of stamp out anybody, any African who wants to, show some kind of care to his people, to themselves, organizing so that they can have a decent world. And so let me say outright the thing I've been thinking about. You wanted also to talk about Russia. Russia is not in Burkina Faso because they want to buy peanuts and goats, right? They're not there for that.
And just because the audience may not know this, Russia has sent commandos into Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
That's not something that's well known. Yeah.
That's right. They've got elite commandos there. As you know, Russia's managed to rebrand Wagner into Africa Corps. So when post-Prigozhin, that's how they did it. So now Russia has some kind of it's not a mercenary group anymore, like classical mercenaries, but they're part of the official Russian military strategy now. So which really, in fact, they've been copying the United States, paramilitary groups that are almost legitimate, but sort of off in case anything happens, the countries can just pull out of there. So as I said again, Russia is not there because they want to buy peanuts and goats. And no, if Burkina Faso also want to be in partnership because they want to be begging bulls. And I think this speech, which was given at the Russia-Africa summit last year, was very powerful. The young man at the time, I think it was 36, he called out all these African puppets. Say, but how do you match this? There's some kind of cognitive dissonance. You have wealthy countries, all of them. There's not one African country that's not wealthy. But one of the things I remember Michael Parenti, the famous sociologist, used to said, these countries are not poor. They're exploited and made poor. And that's the point. Even the narrative of the World Bank, where I used to work, and the IMF and all these huge institutions, they're using, $1 to $2, and I asked myself, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. How do you figure out that the life, the standard of living of somebody is just $1 to $2? It doesn't make sense. And it's not really real on the ground because they've been sucking out the wealth of these countries. So young President Traore, and as you've seen this past week, he has become the symbol, almost like a celebrity all over the world. And that symbol is waking up a great deal of youth around the world. And this is concerning not just African puppets, but also their patrons in the West largely. They're worried and they want to get rid of him because he's now becoming the centerpiece that's igniting some kind of, it's not just a rebellion, but a serious, realization and waking up that we can't continue doing the same wrong things as leaders. We must change. We must not only change ourselves, but also make sure that when we govern a place, like a country, a community, a nation, we must do it right and just for everybody to benefit. And he's very modest. He doesn't have a complicated life. Of course, he's a simple man. He plays soccer, football. His salary, he cut down. He's still having his military salary, a very small, meager salary. Increased the salaries of civil servants by 50%. Managed to set up a gold refinery to really clean up the mess in the gold mining sector. And then, of course, cut a deal with the Russians to consider building 2 nuclear power plants for just energy to feed his country. And then, of course, the Russians have moved there in 2023. Because remember, the Soviet Union used to touch base with them in 1967. And then in 1992, they, let's say Soviet Union, fell apart. So Russia moved up because they didn't have enough money. They were sort of really, restructuring their system. So they went out, they closed their embassies, came back in 2023 with Prime Minister Lavrov. And this is becoming big. And the key issue here is, as I said again, it's not about peanuts and goats. West Africa is becoming, Jamal, it's a very important thing to look at. And this is a missing angle and insight. It's becoming a huge place for Eurasian influence as Russia builds up the strength of the defense, the security, the military, the protection system territorially. China complements with the finance, the economics, the building of the ports and other things. And this is a place to watch. And very soon, it's not just in Burkina Faso, but Russia might closely move down to Ghana or Ivory Coast and maybe Senegal, because the excitement about the youth, about finding somebody to help them. And we hear all the time, but wait a minute, Russia and China is going to be another exploiters. That's what we hear from the West. It's a very typical approach to cutting down people. You must make strategic decisions for partnership that can help you. It doesn't mean you're going to have to become another slave. And I think this is smartly what President Ibrahim Traore is exploiting, as well as President Assimi Goïta in Mali, as well as Abdurrahman Chiani in Niger, and it's growing.
My understanding, there were multiple attempts on his life. One, as you pointed out, it was poisoned. Another one, jihadis were apparently supposed to attack, kill him specifically in order to create turmoil in the country. And the clip or the picture that I was showing, Al-Qaeda branch killed 350 fighters, not civilians, in Burkina Faso. So somebody was making a point. It's very weird that they always go after enemies of the U.S. or go after, let's say, people that the U.S. don't necessarily like. Now, that was an old one. That was back in 2000, let's say 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But yes. I'm pointing out that, the U.S. had been paying and backing ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria in order to undermine the Syrian government. They did the same thing for Gaddafi in Libya. And so it wouldn't necessarily be shocking to me that he has to deal with these coup attempts from these, let's say, terrorist groups that are trying to destroy what he's been trying to build with the help of the rest of Burkina Faso, or for that matter, the Sahel states in general, that, they're trying to take his life. And they're trying to take his life for a very specific reason, that he is effectively given a pathway to, I'm going to call it a new Africa, if that's not overstating it.
Yes, I even call the next Africa, because it's not too far. And the idea that this young man of 37 is just challenging the humongous West by just doing the simple things that other African leaders should have been doing is just extraordinary. The tremendous excitement. This past week, all around the world, there were protests telling the French and Americans, don't touch this man. In fact, he's gone beyond celebrity status now. He is probably the symbol that's now bringing not just Black people in Africa, but also, white people around the world. For example, I was watching George Galloway having series of little podcasts about him, as well as other people. And it's just growing. And there's the concern for the West and those who are hiding behind the curtain is that if this grows too far, they'll be losing their power. But many of them are really lost, especially the French. The French are scrambling. That's why they want to kill him. I mean, we can't even remember the number of attempted failed assassinations. And then sometimes we say 18, sometimes 20. We're not quite sure because there are all sort of things that they don't talk about. But he's really lucky to still be alive. And many of us, of course, are worried that, I mean, it reminds me of Fidel Castro. You know, Castro, I think, escaped something like over 800 or 900 assassinations.
Ridiculous number, right? Right. Exploding cigar. Yeah, just all sorts of weird stuff. Yeah.
So he escaped. The playbook of the West and those who want to destroy these African countries is that they want to kill the heads, at least those who are emerging as potential leaders to just help Africa get rid of this choking yoke that's been on our neck for so many centuries now. And so the fight is going to be there, and we're all going to be fighting. Some of us are fighting with words, as I'm doing with you, and regularly on your weekly show, writing op-eds to just create that conscience that there must be that kind of freedom coming, and we need to embody that. And the traitors must be dealt with harshly because they're the ones who are slowing down the progress of Africa by selling off the wealth, selling off the dignities, and then making people poor to death. And that is unacceptable.
Oh, I so agree with you. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things about this is he shines a spotlight on other African leaders. And it's like, okay, well, why couldn't you do this? Why couldn't you do this? You know what I mean? Like, these three states are effectively coming together. And in them coming together, they are coming up with ideas on, okay, how can we make our societies better? How can we make our people better? How can we increase the wealth? And he came to the conclusion, okay, well, these gold mines, these are ours. Why don't we take these gold mines? Like, effectively saying, look, we need a new norm. And the colonial yoke that was on us is preventing us from taking action that is in the betterment of our populations. And if you look at all of Africa, the fact that it's being exploited in the way that it's being exploited gets across how rich it is. I was watching this video, they were talking about uranium, and they were showing how the amount that Africa was getting for uranium, let's say it might have been like 1%, 2%. And then France would sell it for ungodly sums of money. Let's say it's like $5, and they sell it for like $500 a share. Yeah, just insane differential where they were effectively screwing over the country for their own benefit. And the government of that country, democratic as they call it, allowed it. Perfectly allowed it. This is perfectly okay. And you think to yourself, okay, well, what does this mean for other parts of Africa? Certainly they're seeing that example, or the populations are seeing that example. And if he is successful, oh my God, if he is successful.
He has been already successful. The simple fact, there's been very few people in the past, I would say, perhaps 40 years have been so, I mean, just it's the sudden, almost, I wouldn't say celebrity, but fandom, but just realization that, but here's a symbol. It's not just a human being, but a symbol of something that all of us have been thirsting for decades. You know, how do we protect that person? How do we make sure that he continues his work in safety and then also in dignity so that nobody else around him, bodyguards or anybody else, kills him? And I'm sure you're aware that one of his close bodyguards was offered $5 million or something to just execute him. And the guy said, I can't sell my soul and the soul of my country as well, and the dignity of protecting our project, you know, being free for $5 million. And he went and then he reported that to Ibrahim Traore, and they caught the people, did it. But they're gonna keep trying. That's the thing about these guys. They just don't give up. So that's one of the reasons Russia is also a good partner there to help them beef up security, defense, and then the territorial integrity of the country. And sometimes you hear all these reports by jihadists are killing so and so. Be also watchful. In fact, there's a huge cyber war going on the internet, on social media, that I've got to tell you. The Burkina and Ibrahim Traore are winning this one with the help of Russia, of course, and then China. They're doing fabulous job. I mean, every time I put on my, if you're on TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is, boom, here's Traore. Here's Traore. I mean, I just can't breathe. So they're doing something fabulous. But we must say also that, in simple comparison term, if you took Burkina Faso and Russia, they're like a giants of 17 million square kilometers. And then the other one is roughly about, 24, let's say, 24, 3,200 something square kilometers. That's about the sixth of Russia. And so the goal there, and we're hearing that, we heard from Michael Langley, the head of Africa, that President Traore is selling off the gold of Burkina Faso to pay off the Russians. My goodness, what an insult. Can't he use his own money to do what he wants to do with it, his own gold? The gall of this guy. And of course, everybody say, hey, I'm afraid to say this. This is what I'm reading out there. Why is this house nigger putting his hands in his mouth in something that he has nothing to do with, especially where his ancestors came from, to destroy Burkina Faso, to destroy Africa, and that must also stop. And so Langley is not really a welcoming person. At least his image is not well seen on the continent right now.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine, right? I mean, but that's opposition that means you're in a good place. Like the notion that Africa was in good hands under colonialism is absurd. It's just absurd. And the notion that the colonial yoke that was stuck there when colonialism, quote unquote, ended is absurd. Like, you can't have a country that, think of Russia, for example. Think of all the mineral wealth. Think of all the commodities. Obama made this point of saying Russia is a gas can masquerading as a state, as a country. The US took that to heart, and they believe we can knock that gas can over there, Nigeria with snow. And what they come to find out was that it's one thing to have money, it's another thing to have materials. I can't put $1 in my gas tank. I can't put $1 in my house. I can't fertilize my grain with $1. But you can do that with commodities. Meaning you have an indispensable part of the world economy based on the wealth of that nation that you can't do without. And because of such, the economy kept ticking along despite the war. And they kicked ass in the war. And then if you look at Africa as a continent and you say to yourself, okay, but Africa is also rich. Why aren't they able to exploit the resources in the way that Russia is able to exploit their resources? And you have to kind of come to this conclusion of the colonial past, like the democratic structures that were set up, for example. Those things have not been to the benefit of Africa and for them to be able to use their own resources to enrich their own countries. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong with this.
Indeed. In fact, as I shared with you, I wrote 2 or 3 pieces, op-eds, a couple of years ago on the centrality of commodities, especially gold, right, in Africa, and especially in West Africa, like right all across the continent, there's gold. If you remember the Empire of Mali with Kanka Musa in the 13th century, I mean, one of his trips he took to Mecca via Cairo was with hundreds of thousands of, gold bars and so forth, and then dropping off, killing the gold market in Cairo for a decade. But at the heart of that, that's what really attracted the Europeans, modern Europeans, to come and then do the scramble in Berlin, the Berlin Conference. But this gold is still there. They've discovered, as I sent you, another huge deposit right across all these countries, from all the way down Ghana, Ivory Coast, Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mauritania, the southern part of Algeria. It's all full of gold. Unbelievable. They don't even know what they're going to do. So if President Trump wants to disengage from Africa, that's okay. In fact, we don't want that. We don't want him here because people can do business with other people who are not belligerent, you know. And it's not about war. It's about peace. Kind of, the Chinese call it win-win way of doing, you know, business with people. And people are just sick and tired of wars, Jamal. And then wars are destroying the continent. Look at the DRC. For the past 20 or 30 years, more than 10, 20 million people have died quietly, you know? And so in Sudan as well, South Sudan, I mean, this must stop. And the African Union and all these international regional organizations being called Africans are doing very little, if not nothing, to really help to bring peace. But still, they're asking the three countries of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali to get back to ECOWAS, the dysfunctional organization that is being run and paid for by the West. And the guys are saying, it's a delusion. We're not going back there. We have our own way. We're going to sort ourselves. And we don't want to use that golden begging bowl to go to people and say, hey, by the way, can you give us a bit of money? When we have a golden bowl in our hands, we should be focusing on that. So where is it coming from? Can we go and get more of that gold and organize ourselves? And I think this is a basic key issue now for the rest of Africa. And leadership that cares, leadership that really has some dignity, modesties to help not only their people, but finding ways to really be, if you want, honest with them and see, am I doing a good job? Are we doing a good job? You know, how are we rating ourselves instead of looking at some of those World Bank indicators that are not really working? You take Ivory Coast, 7% growth for the past, I think, maybe 5 to 6, 10 years almost. But people are struggling. Young people that's just crossing the borders and going to France, dying in the Mediterranean, just because somebody's told them, you know, the good life or paradise is in Europe, which is not true. I mean, you may have seen a video of Giorgia Meloni brutally attacking President Emmanuel Macron about Burkina Faso, where she's showing a picture about, I mean, she said in Italian, bambini, working in a gold mine, receiving nothing and being exploited by France. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah, I saw her. She was very pissed off. I didn't know why she was pissed off though. But yeah,
and that was the reason. Yeah, so she was telling Macron, we don't want the Africans to come to Europe. That's not the point. The point is to leave them alone to have a decent life where they are.
Yeah.
I think it made sense. Just leave them alone. Don't disrupt their lives. Let them work on themselves and with what they have, or support them in the right way. But of course, Macron wouldn't have any of that. It went very quiet. He never had a rebuttal. But this video is going on all over the place. But, you know, in summary, it's going to be most of these people who are awakening, realizing that's going to be a big sacrifice before we get to that. What did Martin Luther King call it?
Promised land.
The promised land.
Yeah.
Probably
quoting. I get to the promised land with you, but you know, you will get to that promised land.
We want it now. We don't want it to last another 10, 15, 30 years. We want it now. And I think that's the difference with old style, you know, liberation or struggle leaders. The young people are now very thirsty and they're very impatient. And they're also learning a lot, finding out where the world is going, how the rise of new nations like Russia or China specifically, and then now Iran and possibly, you know, North Korea, everybody has been insulting to say, and then of course Turkey. There's a mess in this whole thing, but It's a churning that Africans are understanding and to think there's a potential opportunity there to wake up and become again who they were before.
I don't blame him. I mean, like, he is making a point that is damning in many respects. How are we in this continent this wealthy, and yet we're this poor? How does that work? And it's like, that question is damning. And you can imagine 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, people who are living on the continent are thinking the same thing, or at the very least, if they weren't before, with somebody like him that is a lightning rod for this level of progress, or this representation, a symbol that he's beginning to represent. That's a wake-up call. I mean, it really is.
Correct.
Whether or not this stuff can be done in 5 years or 10 years, I don't know, but it is definitely a wake-up call. Koffi, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
My audience have been asking for videos talking about this. And when I saw the Russians were there to protect them, I was like, whoa, the Russians, like, they've sent commando units to protect his life because of the attacks that have been coming externally from the country and from the West, backing some of these goons to go after him and take him out. He is a symbol that they do not want. So
it's a great global outpost for Russia as well. And in this messy world, if Russia can really position itself, as I was saying, Eurasian influence is really growing. You see flags of Russia almost everywhere in West Africa, and very soon, not many Chinese flags, but the Russian flag is up there. There's something about it, and also about President Putin, that's bringing those young people together. They just love it. And those who don't will complain. But the key to it is a very smart partnership with those who can help you. And then later on, you can decide if you want to be with them or not. And I think that's the key strategic way to go.
I think the Russian thing is resistance. They see Russia holding the line against imperial forces in NATO, and they don't buy the line in Ukraine.
That's right.
Koffi, man, thank you for this. Koffi Kouakou, he's an African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you, Koffi. Be safe, man. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
All right, I would like to bring in my next guest. We are joined with the man himself, Dan Kouakou. Dan Kouakou, he is an American human rights, labor rights lawyer and political activist. He previously taught at the International Human Rights of University at Pittsburgh School of Law. I am privileged to have him. Daniel, welcome to the show, man. How you doing? You doing okay today?
I'm doing great. Always happy to be here. Good to see you.
Always happy to have you, especially your learned point of view on this stuff. It's always appreciated.
Thank you.
There is an article that is coming out of Axios, and it's not just Axios. There's a few things, right? So Donald Trump has apparently told Netanyahu he can do whatever he wants in Gaza. And that is presented with things that look like atrocities like this, where they've effectively just taken down buildings. It looks like 9/11 almost. But astonishing. There's no remedy for that. There's no backlash for that. It just is what it is. And that's what the people effectively have to kind of deal with and endure. You also have images like this coming out of Yemen. The Yemen thing is interesting too, but and I do want to show something else for the Yemen thing, but you have pictures. They hit a cement factory, and Yemen caused an explosion that had that level of destruction. But one thing in the Yemen thing, this article, Israel's Iliad port declares bankruptcy following minimal ship activity. And of course, the reason is because Ansar Allah shut down the ports. They declared the Red Sea a red line, and anything that was effectively going into Israel, they were firing at, which made ships try to avoid it, which means they had to go a different route. So there is resistance, but Lord knows they're paying a heavy toll for that resistance. The Axios piece is disturbing. And just so the audience can see it, it's this. Israel plans to occupy and flatten all of Gaza if no deal by Trump's trip. Now, the irony of this is that they've been avoiding a deal. Hamas has been trying to give them anything that they wanted, and they've been like, nope, nope, we don't want it, we don't want it. And even in the article, they point out that Israel itself, meaning the overwhelming majority of the population, believes that Netanyahu doesn't want a deal and is purely keeping the war going just so he can stay in power and potentially avoid a prison sentence. That's amazing. Give me a take on this. I want to dig into it, but I want just your overall take on what I was showing and talking about.
Yeah, well, it is very upsetting what's happening. As you say, Trump has given the green light to Netanyahu to do his worst in Gaza, and he's doing his worst. In addition to these bombings, not just bombing buildings, but bombing tents, people living in tents.
Yes.
Totally defenseless people. He is starving out the population. People are now dying of famine. And that should be, a child is now dying every 40 minutes of starvation. There has been no food or water or medicine, anything brought in for, I believe now 67 days. And in fact, the World Kitchen, this was a week or so ago, they were the last aid team there with any food left to give. And they said they're out now. So there's nothing. There's nothing. And people in Gaza are starting to write their final goodbyes in letters. I have friends in Gaza, they're starting to resign themselves to starving to death. It's really an incredible thing. I mean, even that the U.S. will not make sure that aid is getting into Gaza, that they can't even do that minimal thing. Instead, they've told Israel, it's fine if you prevent aid from getting in. And not just aid. I mean, I'm talking about food. I'm talking about water.
By the way, argue that at the ICJ hearing. Argue that at that point, it's not Israel's job to ensure that they get food.
Yeah, I mean, it is. In fact, under international humanitarian law, you are even with belligerents, you are required to make sure that civilians get the necessities of life. That is something that's been written down and agreed to by the world community for over 100 years. So that's just absurd to make that argument. And in fact, during World War II, there were Japanese leaders who were found guilty by the Nuremberg tribunal for destroying food and preventing food from getting to people in Korea and China. So, and then meanwhile in Yemen, as you say, they're both the U.S. and Israel are bombing
civilians,
the heck out of Yemen.
Yeah.
In fact, yesterday I saw the Yemenis claimed that Israel used a tactical nuclear weapon. That has not been confirmed, but certainly they're using weapons of that magnitude there. On by the way, let's point out, on a country that is amongst the poorest of the world, that's been battered by a war since 2015 that the U.S. was supporting, a Saudi war against that country. I mean, when you look at Gaza, you look at Yemen, I mean, the U.S. is fighting the most defenseless people in the world. I mean, it really is so shameful. The U.S. will never fight an adversary that can defend itself, right? And Israel, you can say the same about them. So it's a terrible thing that's happening. And as you say, there's not going to be a deal in Gaza. There was a deal. We should point out there was a deal that was signed. The Hamas was abiding by it. Israel never abided by it. And they were the ones that broke the ceasefire, Israel and the United States. There's not going to be a ceasefire for the reasons you say, that Netanyahu needs war all the time just to survive politically and to stay out of jail. And as you say, the people of Israel know that. And basically, he's literally burning his own country to the ground, right? I mean, literally, there's been wildfires started by settlers who were trying to burn Palestinian crops, and it backfired, and the fire spread. And the war on Gaza has made it very difficult, of course, to fight those fires. Netanyahu is willing to burn his own country to the ground to save his own skin.
Yeah.
And, that is a scary proposition. It also means he's willing to destroy a lot of other people on his way down. He is a madman. I mean, this guy will go down as one of the, great monsters of our time. And the U.S. was behind him 100%, it will be said.
Yes, we were. And paid, what, 70 to 80% of that genocide? Like literally money, bombs, weapons. They couldn't do it without our support.
They couldn't do it without us. The U.S. is refreshing their munitions every 16 hours.
And then
without that, they couldn't prosecute the war.
And then you get people like this in Congress that say, I love blocking Muslim terrorists. They clearly aren't too hungry, but this line, hey, Muslim terrorists, starve harder. Right here, starve away, he puts. That's astonishing. They're starving 2.2 million human beings, 2/3 of which are women and children.
Yeah.
And there's not an ounce of humanity in him, where his thing is starve harder. And to make this even worse, they are forcing people, you could say force marching, hungry people into concentration camps that are so tiny, like right here. So this is, who put this up? Press News. All right. There's articles to this that I have, but this makes the point that much clearer, which I like. Israel has launched a new operation, Gideon Chariots, announcing the forced relocation of Gazans to a 45-kilometer squared area south of Morak Axis in Rafah, the only zone where they'll be allowed with 2.2 million people. The population density will exceed 49,000 per kilometer squared. That's astonishing. That's what they're effectively doing and what we are backing as they do it. That's amazing.
Yeah, and Rafah now looks like the surface of the moon. I mean, there's nothing left there. I mean, you're going to concentrate people in a place that has nothing. No trees, no buildings, no water, nothing. I mean, really, this is so inhumane. It staggers the mind. It staggers the mind. The world is watching this. The Security Council does nothing because the U.S. vetoes everything. Though the UN does have the power, they could do a Uniting for Peace resolution to override the Security Council and order something to be done. That hasn't been done. It baffles me. Honestly, it baffles me that the world is not doing anything. The Arab world is doing nothing. In fact, they're helping Israel.
Yep.
How
do you square that? I mean, like, if for all of the angry speeches to their populations, right? They do nothing. They stand by. Saudi Arabia, Egypt. I mean, Iran is, they call it terrorism. Okay, you've just murdered like 100,000 people, and you're death marching them into a death camp. Put it in context. And you're complaining about Iran supposedly trying to get a nuke that your own government doesn't even acknowledge that they're trying to get. That's astonishing to me, right? Israel has nukes. Israel has been murdering all of these people left and right. And they're calling for a new buildup in Gaza where they're effectively saying we're going to take over all of Gaza and occupy Gaza. Now, this is pretty amazing considering the Israeli military is in tatters. I mean, they're expecting, even in that article they point out, they're expecting tens of thousands of people to just not show up to being called to go back into Gaza. And some of the soldiers, many of them, have been fighting the entire time. So they haven't even had rest. And yet they keep going.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And we didn't even mention, I'm sure you have mentioned on your show at some point that, meanwhile, Israel bombed an aid ship that was coming from Malta.
Flotilla, yeah.
Yeah, that had, European volunteers on it, and one of them was going to be Greta Thunberg. Apparently, she was going to join that ship.
Yeah.
By the way, I was never a big fan of her. I always thought she was a bit shallow in terms of her views, but now I really like her. And of course, now that I like her, the media doesn't pay her any attention anymore.
Right. Now they hate her, right?
Yeah, because she cares about the wrong issue now.
Yeah.
But it's an incredible thing. And again, has the West complained about this? That in fact their own citizens were bombed by Israel in waters of Malta? I mean, it's incredible.
See, this is why I say there's no such thing as international law. Because
it's been destroyed. Yeah, it's been dismantled. I mean, it has been dismantled, root, limb, and leaf by the United States. And this is where we're left with the law of the jungle.
Yeah.
And that's why a country like Yemen is fully within its rights to do what it's doing to try to defend the people of Gaza any way it can. I mean, they're the real country that's a standout, that's doing something decent here.
Yeah. And paying a heavy toll for it.
And they're being vilified for it. They're being bombed as terrorists when we're the terror, right? We're the terror. I don't know if you ever saw the show House of Cards, but at the end of the third season, the president and vice president look into each other and say, "We are the terror," and it's true.
Yeah.
By the way, I wanted to add something that your guest before. I heard your guest at the end, and he said something.
Koffi, he's fantastic.
He was great, but it reminded me of something. What he said is, "Hey, he's glad that Trump's decided to disengage from Africa. They're better off." Reminds me. Che Guevara was on Meet the Press, okay, after the revolution. You can find it on YouTube. It's fantastic to watch, just to watch Che smoking a cigar there on Meet the Press. And they ask him, what do you want from the United States? What do the Cubans want from the United States? And he says, honestly, we want you to forget about us.
Yeah.
Just we forget we even exist. Just go away. Leave us alone, right? And I think that is what the global South wants from the US and the West. Just go away. Stop stealing our stuff. Stop meddling in our government. Stop killing our people. And I'm glad he mentioned Congo because Congo is a country that is not talked about enough.
Mm-mm.
He is right that millions have died there. Now, he says silently, I guess silently, but 6 million were killed in the mid-90s and not such a silent way. The U.S. supported Rwanda to go in and literally rape and murder millions of people, including Congolese. That was under Bill Clinton, of course. Your tax dollars at work. And those killings, not on quite that level, but those killings continue to this day and all over mineral reserves. It's all about getting these rare earth minerals.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Che Guevara fought there too in the Congo for a while.
Did he?
Yeah, he did. There's a movie called Che in the Congo. It's a very interesting movie. I've done a lot of work with the Congo, actually, and have very good friends who are activists there. They showed a movie called Che in the Congo, which is great. But in any case, all these issues overlap, and that's why it's important to bring them all together. But we're witnessing something terrible, something awful. And I feel beside myself, impotent to be able to change it, to do anything about it.
I think all of us do. It's one thing if it's invisible. Okay, well, if it's invisible, right? You can't see it. It's another thing when you open up Twitter and video after video, there's a kid starving, there's a kid getting shot, there's a building being blown up. And it's almost like your awareness of it makes you impotent to do anything about it on some level. It's like there's a disconnect somewhere Like usually awareness is the first step to being able to change a situation. That's not the way this is working. This is very bizarre. It's like we're watching the Nazis.
Yeah, well,
Marching through the death camps.
yeah, in fact, and I'm blanking on her name, but she's very good, very popular critic of. She's out of Australia. I'm forgetting her name. Anyway, what she said, and her name will come to me, but she said something very important. It's not just that us viewing these atrocities is part of the plan. They want us to see this. They want us to know that this can be done to anyone at any time, including us. This is terrorizing us too. And that is part of the plan, you know. And Israel in particular, one of its goals is to show step by step that there is no line out there that can't be crossed, right? If they want to starve people, they'll starve people. They want to rape people, they'll rape people. They want to murder children, they murder children, and no one will do anything about it. And they want to prove that they can do that. And when you see these videos, you see the photos. Every day on Facebook, I see photos of these beautiful children, and it says that they were just killed. All right. And again, the West wants to prove to you, we can do that. We're going to do that, and you can do nothing about it. You know, I do think this is trying to wear us down morally. And that's a crime in and of itself.
What do you think? I mean, wouldn't it apply to these Arab governments also? Egypt, Syria, Lebanon. I mean, at this point, Syria is just complicit. I mean,
UAE's complicit, Qatar's complicit, Saudi Arabia. No, it's terrible. Those governments are condemnable. I mean, you know.
Well, I guess my point is, Greater Israel goes into those governments also.
Right. Well,
Don't they know that?
it's an incredible thing that they're opening themselves up to Israel's domination. You know, but again, it's all about these governments have been captured by very corrupt people who all they care about is lining their own pockets. They're not patriots. They don't care about their own national sovereignty. They're not, you know what I'm saying? Like they are bought and paid for by moneyed interests of the West. And they don't care about their own people, about their own nations. And the same, by the way, can be said of the Western leaders. They don't care about their own people or nations either. All they care about is lining their pockets. You know, we live in a world where people can make money by just having money, and they can make money, you know, internationally without building anything, without laying one brick on another brick in their own country, right? And that's a new world. That wasn't always the case, right? And given that, they have no loyalty to their own countries, and people, I think, have not fully woken up to that reality. You know, that these capitalists, these rulers, have no roots in our country. They don't need us to be rich, and in fact, they'd be happy just to deal without us.
Well, at some point, there's going to be tech and robots. And I don't think people fully grasp that reality, that it is incentivized. Like, if I could put a machine that flips a hamburger for $14.95, and you want $15 an hour, I'm putting in that robot. If I can set up a store where you can walk in and walk out, and I don't need a cashier, then that cashier is no longer going to have a job. And the moment that you can get a society that's arranged that way, then you need workers less. I don't need you to work in a factory if I can have an automated factory. I don't need you to work in that store. I don't need you to drive that Uber. Like, that is control in a way that we have never seen before. That is breathtaking.
No, it is. I saw a video out of China. It was incredible. They have these little I don't know how to call them, but they're these flat little things. They can go under cars and move them. They don't need people to move cars. They just send these robots underneath them. They lift them up and they move the cars. They don't need valets, right? And again, that's where the world's moving. We won't need truckers. We'll have, right, which is a major industry, right, and a major employer. There'll be self-driving cars and trucks and all that. No, it'll be a brave new world of an economy without workers. And what is going to be done with those workers? How are they going to make a living? How are they going to find meaning? Even now, lawyers, I'm a lawyer, and I don't do this myself, but I know lawyers who most of the briefs they write through Chat GB. What is it? Chat.
Are you serious? Chat GPT?
Yeah, just Chat GPT. Now, by the way, and then they'll send me the draft, and there'll be many bad mistakes. Like they'll cite cases for propositions where those cases stand for the exact opposite. It's very dangerous. But, they will probably get that technology better people, again, writers, screenplays will be written by AI, books, legal briefs, robots are already conducting surgery in hospital, it's, I guess we're getting a little far off field, but maybe not. The point is human life is becoming, look, to the ruling class, the only thing we ever were was labor to begin with, right? To create wealth for them. They don't need our labor.
Yeah.
So they can wipe people out. They can wipe them off the map.
And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that if labor controls the tools of production. The issue is when this stuff goes to the 1%.
We could have these, and if you had a social welfare state, we could all go fishing all day. That's fine.
Exactly.
But I don't think that's the plan. Sadly, that's the plan.
So that's not the plan, right? Right. Yeah, we're off base. I'm sorry. But you're absolutely right. They don't need us. They don't care about us. And the part of me thinks, okay, well, like, what does somebody who's Arab think when they see that? Like, because on some level, it gives value, right? It's society appropriating value in human terms of what you're worth. Like when the Nazis were doing that to the Jews, okay, what did you think you were worth that you knew a larger society out there? And see, this is even different than that, right? Because they didn't have Twitter. They didn't have Facebook. It wasn't like America was watching them do that. It wasn't like the Russians were watching them do that. They came across the death camps and liberated those camps. This is different. This is not the same. Like, this is the world seeing this, and the world on some level not doing anything implicitly says it's okay.
Oh, like I think it's more than implicit. It's more than implicit. Yeah, the world is saying it's okay. Do you know that Israel has been dropping leaflets onto Gaza telling the people no one cares about you. The world doesn't care about you. The Arabs don't care about you.
Wow.
Which is obviously very, very cruel and wrong. But the truth is that
it's true.
There's some basis to that. And that's a terrible thing. But, and the people of Gaza know it. I mean, they know they've been abandoned. And it's just heartbreaking. Yeah, I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. Just when you thought it couldn't get worse, it gets worse. And we need to resist. Let me just say that as we start to finish up here, we need to resist with every fiber of our being. We need to speak truth. We need to speak out against these atrocities, call them what they are, atrocities, abominations. And we can't lose our humanity. They want us to lose our humanity by watching these crimes and becoming inured to them, used to them. And we can't do that. We can't let ourselves do that.
Yeah, it's an outrage. You can't, like I saw somebody who was like, Jamal, you shouldn't say this. There was a protest, I think, taking place, I forget in what university, and they were setting stuff on fire. They were like flipping out. And I said, these people are doing God's work. And somebody says something to the effect of, oh, dude, this is not good to say. And as I pointed out, we're run by sociopaths. What is the other reaction?
Yeah,
Like,
no, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're run by sociopaths and these people are committing murders and the people were burning stuff to make a point, and you're like, hey, they're burning stuff. It's like, dude, you're missing the point. Like, they are making a point. You're run by sociopaths. That is more of an issue than the fact that they're burning stuff. I get it. I don't like, chaos either. I don't necessarily want to go to a particular place and people are burning stuff down. That's not the most joyous thing in the world for me, right? By the same token, there is something that is taking place that is breathtakingly horrible. Horrible is not even the right word for it. Atrocity is probably a better word for it. Genocide is a better word for it. What is the reaction? Like what is the rational reaction to seeing a genocide? It's not normality. It's just not. And so
business as usual cannot continue. And it is that meme, which is, I've said it once, I'll say it again. If you wondered what you would do during the Holocaust as a German, now because you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we like to watch movies where people resist the Nazis, even things like Inglourious Bastards, whatever, go get them and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm sorry, we're in that phase. We're in the phase where we need to shut the system down. We can't let it continue the way it is.
One last thing. What is the point of this death march? Is it, okay, we're putting people in a box with the idea that we're trying to expel them?
I think they want to kill them. I think they want to destroy. That's what genocide is, to the intention to destroy in whole or part a certain people. Here, I think they want to destroy in whole the people of Gaza. I think they want to kill every man, woman, and child.
Basically,
I'm sorry to
starve them
say
to
that,
death.
but that's what I think they want.
Just starve them to death. It's
Yeah.
like, all right, we don't want to waste bombs. We don't want to waste bullets. That looks bad. So let's just starve them to death.
Yeah, and then they'll say, oops, sorry they starved to death. We don't know how that happened. That's where this is going. It's where
And
it's
the
going.
U.S. will go and say, well, Israel doesn't have a right or have a need to feed this population. I mean,
They'll blame Hamas, right? It'll be Hamas's fault, and that'll be the end. Yeah.
Daniel, thank you for this. It's an atrocious thing to talk about, but it needs to be talked about. I mean, the fact that this is taking place on our watch with our tax dollars,
Yes.
with our the government support, given coverage in the UN and the ICJ, it's taking place on our soil. We're responsible. It can't happen without us. We're culpable.
We
Dan
are.
Kouakou.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. It's true.
Dan Kouakou, American human rights, labor rights lawyer and political activist. He's previously taught at the International Human Rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. Daniel, thank you, man. You be safe, okay?
Thank you. You too. Be well.
All right. All right. We have come to the end. Filth is in charge. Yes. Filth is in charge. That's what it is. Sociopaths. And by the way, either political party. There's no way out. Both political parties. Both political parties. Let's go to chat before we leave. This guy doesn't trust the government, but he wants them to control all our resources. So you are talking about Jim Kavanagh. So that's a yes and no. I don't trust the government that's run by sociopaths either. That's just me. But the government he's talking about is run by people. That people is the point. The public will is the point. What is in public interest is the point. And having a government that is organized around that. He gave an example of the way the Chinese government is kind of arranged. He's not saying the US government needs to look like China, but he is making a point that the economic system and the way they operate, the government, has a social component that's built into the bricks. Whereas in our government, what's built into the bricks is you can make as much money as you possibly want, even if it destabilizes the country itself, and it's cancerous on society. That is perfectly okay. Those are different models. Those are different thoughts. In one, a government is working for the interests of the public, and it's even in the economic sense working towards that interest. In the other, it's working for the interests of private enterprise. Freedom for who to do what, right? We need our freedom in this country. Okay, well, yeah, freedom is conferred to the people with cash. If you are dirt poor, you have the freedom to die on the street without healthcare, education, and everything else. There's a difference in those things. He's being consistent. You're just ignoring the fact that he's being consistent and maybe not listening to exactly what he's saying. So, I'm just saying. Sandra Johnson, new member. Welcome to the family, Sandra Johnson. Welcome to the family. Always love new members. Christopher, you're killing me. Christopher Sapaya. I'll leap for it. Sapaya, I'll go with that. Super sticker. Thank you for that. I deeply appreciate it. All of the stuff helps, keeps the show ticking along. So thank you for it. It's one man band. And the last one, Hani. I love that name. Thank you, Jamal, for standing up for humanity. Damn it, I try. Look, there is sometimes like a criticism with people saying, oh my God, you hate this country. And I remember there was even one guy that even said something like, you hate this country. I am always blown away by those comments. I am literally always blown away by those comments. I am a patriot. No more, no less. And what I mean by that is, I don't mean that in a Trumpian sense. I mean that in the sense of, we are run by sociopaths. Your government is fueling and paying for a genocide with your dollars. Now, if you're a MAGA, you may not care. You may not give a shit. Okay, we don't care about those Palestinians. Okay, fair enough. But do you care when due process, in your cases for January 6th, was being thrown away? You cared when they were throwing your ass into a cage when you tried to overthrow the government of the United States. Oh, then you cared. You cared when they were going after Donald Trump with these bullshit cases. Then you cared. I'm making the point of saying you can't have it both ways. Either you believe in the ideals of the country or you don't. Either believe in the values or you don't. You can't have it both ways. Empire is not a value of the country. That's some shit that's in their minds that they've hijacked the country and driving it into the ground. $10 trillion for wars. What can you buy with that money? Did you ever think of that? $10 trillion just pissed away on murdering people, murdering 1 million people, and going in from one country after the next, killing and murdering your way through. Not to mention the overthrowing of governments in South America, or for that matter, Iran, etc. I'm saying these people are nuts. They're whack jobs. And me pointing that out is not me hating the country. It is me hating those whack jobs that have taken over the country. There's a difference in those things. And so when Jim Kavanagh is making that point of saying, these people are lunatics, they're fucking over the country, he has a point. When you have somebody on the show, on Brian Berletic, and he's pointing out, hey, these people are whack jobs. They're trying to overthrow these governments and fucking up as they do it. Okay, he has a point. This is not people hating a country, because the country is more than just the politicians who run that country or the media that drive a particular narrative and put people in a particular frame of reference that makes the shit that they do okay or cover for the things that they do. Those are different things. Your country could be different. It could be better than what it is. It could be that beacon on a hill. It is not that beacon on a hill. It is a fucking embarrassment. And if you think about other countries around the world that has finally caught on and say, hey, there's something wrong with the states. For one, the thing that's built into the bricks is cancerous. It doesn't work. And I'm saying that to say, when is the last time you've had a competent government? When is the last time you've had a competent government where the public will mattered in regards to any decision that they effectively made in that government? Again, when I'm criticizing this, I'm being specific to the government and the ruling class. We have taken it upon ourselves to be okay and get used to sociopaths running our political affairs. Me criticizing that is me not hating on the country. It's me hating those whack job sociopathic lunatics that have taken control of this country for God knows how many years and have driven US policy into a fucking ditch. That is the issue. And you should hate those sociopaths too, because they're not doing anything for your benefit. Full stop. These cultists that are in MAGA that believe, oh, we don't need due process. You're fucking idiots. I'm sorry, you are. These cultists on the Democratic side that, no, Joe Biden is perfectly fine. And no, we shouldn't mention the fact that he's committing a genocide and paying for a genocide because we need to get Kamala Harris elected. You're fucking idiots. I'm sorry, you are. Both of you are the same, just different color. Both of you are the same, at least from my point of view. Both of you are problematic. If you can't put America above your own political interests, then you are part of the problem. And I mean that regardless of the political party that is in office, as a flat fact. I mean that. So yeah, standing up for humanity, damn right. Standing up for some ideal America that's not run by these lunatics. Yes, you damn right. And I find that to be a worthy objective. If you want to take that as to me hating the country, okay, God bless. You can ignore the reality of what I'm pointing out. But that is the way I do see it. That's the way I do see it. Love my country. My very basis of understanding, my value set that I am literally criticizing the country with comes from that same country. Caboodles, Captain D's, Chicken Bucks, the Stop and Go. Like, maybe, I guess I'm saying, yes, I'm saying this stuff through food because I'm hungry. But criticism of a ruling class is not the same thing as going after the country proper. Those are different things. It is a worthy objective to point out that your government is fucked up. Your government is fucked up. There's one last one, and that goes to Adric Hab. Hi, Jim Kavanagh alluded to the, quote, fear of the black planet. Public Enemy. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. His point is, look, his point may be controversial, but I think it's true. Change comes through some level of threat. And without leverage, nothing happens. Okay, yeah, you're bitching, so what? I don't care. You're just bitching. Oh my God, they have some leverage on us that they can utilize where they can keep shit in chaos. Okay, now we need to make a change because we don't want shit to be in constant chaos. Okay, one is leverage. The other one is bitching. They're different things. Even protests. Protest is a threat of violence by definition. A large number of people are gathering, very pissed off about a particular cause and rummaging through the streets. Okay, maybe orderly. It doesn't have to stay that way. It's understood. It doesn't have to stay that way. If you sanitize it, it loses power. Just saying. All right, I'm going to end this. No, I'm not calling for violence. It's just reality. It just is what it is. I'm going to say, like Fear of the Black Planet was a good album, Charles G. You're absolutely right. Shout out to the members of the chat. I need to remember to do that. Adrian Dittman, Rupert Fellows. I haven't seen you there before, Rupert. Welcome to the channel, I think. Charles G. Shiznitz. Cherie, Honey, Neil. What is this? Curie. Fine home paintings. Fair enough. Fine home paintings. It is. Sophia Martinez, Cypher Agent. All of you. I'm not going to be able to get to everybody. There's a lot of people here. We had over 700 and some people here today for the entire show. So thank you for that. You guys have a fantastic day. My rent person just hit me up. I'm only going to be here to the 23rd. Like I said, I'm going to be leaving on the 22nd. But I'm going to do the show on the 22nd. You're not going to see me on the 23rd, but you will see me on Monday. I will be at a new residence. From my understanding, it's perfectly hospitable. I'm going to be there for 3 months. I'm sick of bouncing from place to place. I want to be somewhere longer where I can spread out. Effectively, I was bitching at him because of the construction. It's like, dude, I'm trying to do a show. What the fuck? What are you doing? And then you're frustrated because to me, my show is sacred. I know that sounds wild. To use the term sacred for something like that. But I feel like, this is some shit we built. And it wasn't, built from zero. I wasn't on Young Turks. I wasn't on any of these other broadcast networks. I didn't have any help from the standpoint of other channels. This was shit that I did. I know Tim Black likes to bring shit up. Fuck him. He's out of his fucking mind if he thinks he had anything to do with it. No, this was built from scratch. And so, yeah, I feel this is sacred on some level. I don't like things intervening, and I get frustrated, heavily so, when things intervene that shouldn't intervene. It's one thing if it's like, hey, by the way, we're going to have construction at this particular property. Okay, then I wouldn't get that property, right? It's another thing when I'm showing up at the property, and then all of a sudden there's construction, and it's like above, and they're like banging at the thing. It's like, what the fuck? I can't do a show like that. I can't do a show like that. Dude, you need to fix this shit. That's too much information. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. Shout out to all of you, and thank you. You keep this show going, and you keep me sane. You guys have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show episode, what is this? 148. 148. Signing off. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Actually, by the way, I have a guest that is in Australia. He is 14 hours difference between this show and where he is. I want him to come on the show. His name is Tim Anderson. He's a professor, or he's written several books. In fact, apparently he's going to Yemen coming up. He sent me the book that he wrote on the Middle East and Yemen. I'm going to have to be able to go through it. My travel plans have been finalized and finished. Everything's done at this point. I know where I'm going to my next B&B. So I do have time to look at his book, and I need to get time to read Ted Rawls' book, but I also need to cut videos, and I need to, I think there are like 2 guests I need to book for tomorrow. He is going to be on the show tomorrow at like 6 a.m. 6 a.m. So the show will start tomorrow at 6 a.m. That is going to be a painful morning or painful day. But damn it, I'm going to do it for the show. Not to mention, I want him on the show. I crave new guests, and because his time frame is a bit weird, but I crave new guests. I want new people. I don't want you to see the same people constantly. I know that shows like Napolitano, Dialogue Works, those are fantastic shows, by the way. No shade on any of those. But I like new guests. I like new voices, new personalities. There may be people who you'd be like, oh, this guy's fantastic. You never know until you talk to him. And if you notice, like, in my mind, look, I'll tell you this. If I had a guest that was with me from day one, if I had 200,000 subs and the guy got 500 people, I still run that guest. He's earned it. I owe him for joining me for so long and being with me. It's just a loyalty issue. I want new voices, and I want people for you guys to be able to hear, especially if they're professional and they are experts in the fields to which they study. Dan Kovalik is a fucking human rights lawyer. He's phenomenal. He taught law, for God's sake. Jim Kavanagh, the man has been doing this for years. Writer, specializing in this stuff. Brian Berletic goes without mention. Goes without mention, right? I mean, for fuck's sake, they put him on the list. The notion that you get put on the list is mind-blowing. But the new atlas, even Mark Sloboda references Brian Berletic, which gives you the level of respect that's there from people like Sloboda, who has my radical respect from his experience and knowledge on foreign policy and international affairs. So I try to bring you voices that you may not necessarily see on some of these other channels, but that are damn good in their fields, knowledgeable in their fields, and can give perspective. At least I try. So I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, And I'm going to say subscribe. No, the Garland thing is usually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Today is Tuesday. We didn't do it Monday. And to be honest, I couldn't do it Monday. I was figure out where I was going to go next. Wednesday, yes. Wednesday, yes. I'm going to say like, share, okay, and subscribe. And you guys have a fantastic day. I'll see you brutally early tomorrow. Have a good one.